10:02 on November 19th. And we will call to order the commission meeting for the South Carolina Commission on Disabilities and Special Needs for November. And I would call on Commissioner Blackwood to read the notice of meeting statement, please.
A meeting notice announcing the date, time, and place of November 19th. The meeting was distributed in other groups or individuals that requested notification. The announcement and agenda were posted at the Department of Disabilities and Special Needs Central Administrative Office and on the website. The public has been notified that accommodations such as interpreters, mobility assistance, or other assistance will be provided to individuals with disabilities and special needs if requested.
Thank you. Welcome everyone. We're getting started this morning. The first item up would be the adoption of the agenda, which is on tab 1 of your commissioner book. Does anyone have any changes, modifications, or amendments to the proposed agenda? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Commissioner Blackwood, do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Malphris, thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda is adopted. The first item on that agenda is the invitation, which I will provide this month.
Do you mean the minutes? No.
Uh,
The minutes?
The minutes are number 6.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, invocation
I
of
just, for
minutes.
some reason, thought it was very beginning.
Don't come off the agenda, we just
I
approved
know,
it.
that's why I was making sure they were
I
all.
promise I won't take long.
I guess I was making sure they were all.
Yeah, I promise I won't take long.
I see. Okay.
Throughout history, we as a society have learned that the best way to govern is for people to govern themselves. Today, in this tradition, we as citizens, staff, and commission members have traveled from our homes across the state to work as one community. Each of us arrives as individuals with unique ideas and experiences, but all with the need to serve the needs of others. As we gather to do this, we are reminded that although we have differences, we are linked by this common goal. When we work together to move our community forward in a spirit of mutual respect and cooperation, we showcase what is best about our community, our state, and our nation. Let us strive this day to do that which brings happiness and joy to those who work with us and those we work for. Let us carry the spirit of service and goodwill today and in all of our work. Thank you. The next item on the agenda, under tab 2, is the approval of the minutes from the October 14th special call meeting and the October 15th regular commission meeting from last month. Hopefully everybody had a chance to review that. Does anybody have any additions, changes, or modifications to the minutes as proposed?
Certainly none to the 14th meeting, but our main meeting. I just wanted to call David's attention to the part that relates to our capital improvements and make sure that that was what he had said relating to the capital improvements plan and us not approving the individual items, which is, it does say that. I'm just not sure it says exactly what he said, but if it's fine with him, it's fine with me. I just wanted to make it clarified because we asked for it to be very specific in there, and I just want to make sure.
Chairman, if I won't take you, I'm sorry, I didn't read the minutes, but
I think it's new business section B.
B as in boy,
B is in boy, correct, 2021 spending plan / capital budget.
and which paragraph, 2, 3, or 4 of them?
One that Mr. Robinson made the motion. Sorry,
Actually,
I'm looking at.
Page 4, I'm sorry.
Maybe I'm looking wrong.
I'm looking at page 3 of 6. Okay, page 4. Page 4. Capital, okay, under new business B. Apologize, I hadn't read this, but was this was in full committee, right?
Yeah,
This is the full commission.
Last month, yes. I mean, yeah, this meeting last month. We talked about the capital improvement.
The capital budget.
Yeah, the capital budget.
Who is the he? Mr. Clark expressed that the spending plan will be revised once the final state budget is approved unless we remain under a continuing resolution. Commissioner Thomas made a motion to approve the 2021 spending plan as presented, seconded by Commissioner Wallace, unanimously voted by the commission members. Discussion was held regarding the current assumption that no financing for county program will be obtained, but that this is still a recommendation Mr. Clark stands by. Also, preliminary indication that we would not need the full, I remember this. Preliminary indication that we would not need the full amount shown for vehicles to purchase. Also, discussion was held related to the need pre-capital budget, but not the individual line items, which will come back to the commission prior to spending the money. So that will come back in the form of approval by the commission on the individual items.
Yes, sir. An example of that is the electrical grid that is on the agenda is 9A1. That's an example of the process at work.
Well, I move to revise the minutes to say just what he said, basically. It will come back to the commission for individual line item approval. That's it.
I think it says that, doesn't it? But not the individual line items, and you're saying not individual line items?
Individual line item, commissioner, let's see.
What it says is the individual line items, once the money is to be spent, does come back in front.
Which will come back to the commission
You want to insert for approval?
for approval, yeah. I don't think it just to be a notice that the staff has spent the money, and by the way, here's where it's spent, so just for approval, yeah.
Okay.
That I think, look, thank you.
No problem at all.
Approve the bids, right? I mean, yeah, you'll.
Yeah, we'll prove it on multiple levels.
Multiple levels, yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, that makes it clear. That makes it clear. So the minutes as amended would then, after the word commission, before the word prior, would insert the words for approval. For approval. Just checking staff to make sure they've got that down. Any other proposed amendments or changes? Hearing none, would entertain a motion to approve both sets of minutes as presented with regard to the October 14th meeting and as amended with regard to the October 15th meeting. Commissioner Miller? Yeah, Commissioner Thomas, sorry. We, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All, any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as presented. Amended. The next item on the agenda is Commissioner's update.
Yeah, I got an update.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yeah, it was really interesting. I had talked, had been interested in the Greenwood Genetics Center for some time. And Robin is our liaison to that. As a matter of fact, well prior to that, I had talked to one of the members of the board of directors of the Greenwood Genetics Center, and we run money through here. They get a match that really helps them a lot. Well, I had all this time, I had never really known quite what the center is, and that board member for the center, who's a good friend of mine, said, well, we set something up with Dr. Skinner, he's a wonderful fellow, et cetera, we'd love to kind of tell you about it, show you around. Well, lo and behold, I wrote the doctor, just forget about it. Lo and behold, I get a call from Dr. Skinner. Sometime, I mean, I didn't precipitate this, but I probably would have called Robin and talked to her about it. Well, there it was. So, okay, so let's have you come out. So Pat and I went out and met with him. Our Pat went out and met with Dr. Skinner. It was really interesting. It's part of, but not governed by a self-reachable hospital system. All right, in Greenwood, has a long, distinguished background to it. It goes back, I think, 45 years or so. So we got a nice PowerPoint presentation. Got to see those what kind of fish they have. That zebrafish, Brazilian zebrafish that they take into the genetic strains and mutations from that, and how that all shows up and everything. Anyway, the bottom line to it was that I got to have some questions clarified as to budget issues. That was invaluable. I really do appreciate Mary. You sending him along and letting him kind of help me out, understand what was going on. And they had an interesting exchange also. I asked a lot of questions, a lot of extraneous questions that suited me, because that's the first time I've been able to sit down in real life and ask. real serious questions, things that I've just been reading about. It was a great experience for me, and they were very accommodating, clarified a lot of things in my mind, especially vis-a-vis our operating budget and money not coming out of our operating budget to go like this. Yeah, not at least anymore coming out, but there is a pass-through. They do get matching, triple matching funds through one match. So all that, very interesting. I highly recommend it if the group want to go as a group, because we keep hearing about it, and it has been there for a long time. It's an integral part of the community. They have done some great things that have saved a lot of lives, so I congratulate them. And it was just fascinating. It's a fabulous facility. I mean, part of that center. So that's it. Just want to tell you what I had done on the Greenwood thing. Reporting back. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other updates from anyone?
Very quickly, I've read this interesting booklet called Help, I Have a Sibling with a Disability. And it's by David Duvall, and I would recommend it if anybody would be interested in it. If they are, they could email me and I could send them a copy and let them know what the book is called. It's very inexpensive. It's a book. It's several different things like this that relate to it's a book series called Lifeline, but it's an interesting book. The first chapter is not as good as the rest of it, but the first chapter is kind of silly, but the rest of it is, in my opinion, but the rest of it's really good. So if anybody wants it, it's called, if anybody listening, wants it, it's called Help, I Have a Sibling with a Disability. So it helps people that have a sibling with a disability to understand what that's like and that sort of thing. That was it. Sorry.
Yeah. Any other updates? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is public input. We do have 3 public input lined up today. First is Jason Tabner, I believe, correct? Thank you. We'll be having Jason, or following Jason. I believe Jason will be addressing us about the band B&I conversion.
Who is it?
Jason, is current.
Hello, good morning.
Jason, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Thank you, Jason. It's Gary Lamel. Jason, I was about to introduce you, but if you'll please introduce yourself, and then we'll let you get started.
Sure, be glad to. So good morning, everyone. I'm Jason Towner, the Executive Director for the Lawrence County Disabilities and Special Needs Board. But today I'm speaking to you on behalf of the Human Service Provider Association. So I wanted to speak to you today about the primary focus of transferring the management and funding of BAMBs and Is from DDSN, from the DSN boards to DSN. I believe today that is item 10, letter B on your agenda. It's the BAMB and I switch to fee for service. Before I give our results, the first thing I might say is I'd like to thank DSN management for bringing us to the table, for the opportunity to discuss the transition steps and the feedback on the financial impact that this could have to the boards. Through the process, DDSN presented 3 possible scenarios, labeled 1, 2, and 3 on the sheet that we were given, and asked for feedback from providers across the state. Out of the 55 human service provider members, there are 36 boards or those that function as boards. The responses were received from all 36 of those boards that are also members of our association. The results were as follows. 2 boards voted for option 1, 27 voted for option 2, and 7 voted for option 3. As you can see, the majority of providers voted for option number 2, which is to maintain the gap funding. On a final note, I'd like to ask you to mark your calendars for our annual conference that will be March 8th through 10th, 2021 at the Embassy Suites in Myrtle Beach. I'd like to give a special thanks to Director Mary Poole and Deputy Director Pat Malley, who are working with us this year to develop the agenda and some speakers. Their support of the conference is greatly appreciated. In closing, thank you again for this opportunity to present to the Commission.
Thank you, Jason. appreciate you taking up advantage of the public input section.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Terry, anyway, get a list of who voted, who the two were that voted for one and who the three were that voted for three?
We could ask if they would provide that to us. That I think,
It's not our information.
yeah,
but
it's
we can ask.
right. That would be the Human Service Providers Association.
Yes, I think
So
that.
they want to share that with us. I think Jason's probably listening. I'm sure somebody else is. If they want to provide that information to us, they can.
Yeah.
If you're asking for it, that would be up to them.
Yes, I would appreciate if they could email that to us, even if they could email that to us while we're in this meeting so that we could look at it before we vote. That would be great.
So Jason, hopefully you're still there, or somebody else could communicate with Jason that request has been made. Are you calling Jerry next? Mr. Bernard?
Yes.
Okay.
Bernard, yeah.
All right, so next, the next public input will come from Jerry Bernard of the Charles Lee Center. And he will be talking with us about pay equity for direct support professionals.
Hello, this is Jerry.
Gary Lamel, how are you doing this morning?
Good. How you doing, sir?
Doing just fine. I've got you on speakerphone here with the full commission and open meeting to give you your opportunity to participate with the public input. Thank you very much for doing so.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, commission members. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you for a few minutes. This is Jerry.
You may mute your computer.
What's going on here?
We're hearing feedback on a loop from your broadcast of the meeting. So you need to mute the meeting.
Okay. I just muted myself. Is it better?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I am actually going to be making a statement as the Executive Director of the Charles Lee Center. I am actually responding to a previous comments that were made regarding the issue of livable wage. And since that was a public comment, I felt it was necessary for me to respond to that so I could provide another perspective on that particular issue. So I do apologize. I will be reading a statement. It will be a little bit easier for me to follow, and it'll be short and it'll be brief. So again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to respond to this important issue. So it begins like this. So I've been struggling for a while whether I should respond to comments made by one of our commission members regarding the issue of a livable wage for our employees. It is not that I don't think his comments were misguided and frankly offensive, but rather my worry has been that my comments could lead to consequences or other actions that could put the organization I represent under a dark cloud. So as I pondered what to do, it occurred to me that this is really a human rights issue. The issue of a livable wage should not be defined by the type of job someone has, but rather by the right of every person to receive a fair and equitable wage. All of us have seen on the news how low wage employees who work for the Walmarts of the world and fast food industries have been advocating for higher wages and in many cases have been successful in achieving wage increases. And yet, since what our staff is doing is considered by some as God's work, they should not be afforded the same right to advocate for better wages. I would argue that our DSPs should be paid even more because of what they do, which is so special and important. Instead, we have a commission member who appears to suggest that our employers are paid enough and should stop whining about livable wages. I believe that all people are entitled to livable wages, whether they work in the fast food industry, retail, healthcare, or human services. Just because our employees have an altruistic motivation to want to serve and support individuals with disabilities should not negate their right to receive a competitive and livable wage. Compounding this issue is the realization that our employees are putting themselves in harm's way each day through the coronavirus. Yet they should not be entitled to a livable wage or advocate for one as other industries do. In my opinion, this is ethically and morally wrong. And also at the national level, we are looking at between 400 to 600,000 jobs.
that will need to be filled over the next 10 years across the country. Yet we are not seeing many people choosing to go into this field. Maybe it is because they can get better jobs with better pay, with less stress and with less challenges in the work. So this notion that our employees are getting enough pay is a myth, and more importantly, is an affirmation of, I believe, how little value is placed on the great work our DSPs do each day. So I want to conclude with saying that I will not stop advocating for a livable wage for our employees, and I vehemently disagree with the comments that were made a few months ago. They were devaluing, insensitive, and inappropriate, particularly in light of where things stand with the coronavirus. I do not make these comments lightly. I feel very strongly about the need to continue to advocate for our employees to obtain a livable wage. And I think just in terms of where we are with timing, with all the coronavirus issues that are going on, I think it's really not appropriate for us to question the need to continue to advocate for improved wages for our wonderful staff. So with those comments, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak and be able to speak my mind, and I appreciate that opportunity greatly. Thank you so much.
Jerry, thank you for taking the opportunity to take advantage of the public input. We appreciate it as always.
Thank you.
All right, and the third public input.
Who was that again?
That was Gerald Bernard.
What is he doing again?
He is the executive director of the Charles Lee Center.
Spartanburg County.
Okay.
Next up will be Ralph Courtney, the executive director of Tri-Development Center.
Hello, this is Ralph.
Ralph, this is Gary Lamel. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing fine.
Ralph, we've got you on speakerphone here for the open commission meeting.
Oh, y'all are meeting today? Okay, that's good. No, I've been listening.
Yes, we are. And so would recognize you now for public comment.
Okay, do appreciate it. I'm the executive director of Tri-Development Center and the Aiken County Board of Disabilities. However, that won't last long, as we're in the process of working to have these two agencies considered conflict-free in the provision of case management and early intervention, which means one of those agencies has to get rid of me because I am the primary conflict that remains. But today I'm really here representing the South Carolina Disability Service Provider Coalition, better known as the Coalition. I'm here for two reasons. One's to let you know what the Coalition is, since a lot of you are new. The second is to let you know that we appreciate the work you do and we stand eager to help you. The Coalition is a loosely knit group of 20 agencies working together with one another and DDSN and at times DHHS to bring about improvements in the service delivery system available to our citizens with disabilities on the local level as well as statewide. We were originally formed to meet the challenges and utilize opportunities provided by CMS's final rule and DHHS. Our current state director happens to be a former member of the coalition, and in fact, she was leader in the formation of the coalition back in 2014. So our mission is to be active, independent working partners in efforts to meet the requirements demanded by Medicaid changes, consumer needs, and consumer choices. And many of our original goals were identical to some of the changes we see happening around us today. They include training on DDSN's funding system and expectations of finance officers, though that is vastly improved, direct billing and fee-for-service billing, removing the ICF's IID from the funding band system, increasing the woefully low ICF's IID rates, hopefully that's coming, increasing day services rates, and separating payment for DDSN's administrative services from provider service rates through the creation of a separate DDSN administrative services contract with a 50-50 match rate, abolishing the funding band system was also being advocated by some members way back in 2014 when we were formed. We're supportive of DDSN's current efforts to maximize the federal match available through Medicaid, utilizing our state legislature's current appropriation. We support the establishment of rates that include in their computation an expected level of vacancies. We support rates that have a planned schedule for increases as DHHS includes in its funding plan for many other Medicaid services. We support the cessation of our paying the ICFID bed fee since we are not the license holders and believe existing state legislation supports our position. We support rates that have funds built in to cover future capital needs, especially now more than even in the past since DDSN has halted its funding of capital needs of community programs. The group wanted me to say that we do appreciate your generous donation of your time to assist the population we serve. We realize that your job is not easy, as you've probably discovered. We currently have an overly complicated system, and instead of making it even more complicated by putting patches upon patches, as has been done too often in the past, today it seems like efforts are being made to create a system that can make sense to us all and more easily understood by the individuals we serve and or their families, the state legislature, DHHS, the public, providers, and even the staff of DDSN. We very much support those efforts. So again, thanks to you all for the opportunity to speak, and to the new members, thank you in advance for working with us as we strive to provide quality supports to individuals with lifelong disabilities. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ralph. We appreciate you taking advantage of the public input process.
All right. Thanks again. Bye.
Moving on, the next item on the agenda under Commission Committee business, we will start with the Finance and Audit Committee and would recognize Commissioner Blackwood, starting with tab 3, the first capital project review and approval for the coastal electrical grid.
Yes, thank you. The committee met on November the 2nd, and we have 3 items that we are bringing to the commission to vote on today. The first item, which is under tab 3, which is the capital project for the coastal electrical grid. We had information provided to us regarding the state of the electrical grid, outdated, reached its life expectancy, and just needs to be replaced. And we went through that project and voted unanimously to approve that spend. So we just need to see if anyone has any questions before I guess we vote on this capital improvement.
Well, can I ask a question? Yes, sure. Chairwoman, the grid, it's and I'm not on the finance committee, so
yeah,
humor me a little bit. I know you know all kinds of technical stuff on this. Okay, the grid, when I hear the word grid, I think it's something really, really big, you know, that some power companies hooked up to the Eastern Seaboard grid or something like that. What is a local grid like this? What is that?
Andrew, the speaker right there, if you'll sit in that chair, we have our engineer here to answer your technical questions.
Okay.
I'll kick the ball to him.
Yeah, the grid in this sense is referring to the substation and all the underground lines and transformers that feed the campus. So it is the campus localized grid.
Now, normally, I mean, when you hook up some not electrical, it is, I mean, that would be something that like you'd have Duke Power or whoever
Dominion in this case.
hooking the system up. So what is this that we're having to do that?
This is actually DDSN owned infrastructure. So we have a substation at the front of campus. Dominion comes into that substation, provides power to it, and we take over ownership at that substation. That substation then feeds all the underground lines and transformers throughout the campus. So
I guess I'm having trouble. Okay, so let's think in terms of a university system, Clemson or USC main campus. Do they do that? I mean, you supply the whoever the main supplier is supplies the electrical, and then they have their own basically subsystem?
I can't say this for sure, but I believe that USC does own portions of the downtown system and not others. So I think it's split up, but again, I can't say that for sure. I just know I've heard things about their systems in the past. I believe that's the way they are set up, but they are located in the middle of a downtown area, and they're fed from many directions and own portions and not others.
Talking about coastal?
You're talking about USC, downtown USC, yeah. That's my understanding of how their system is, but again, I'm not sure how accurate
What
that
I'm
is.
getting around to is why do we need a grid when you got an electrical system that should be responsible for the whole thing? That's my question.
Well, that's the intent of this project, is to bring out the system and the infrastructure that we own up to current code and then hand it over to Dominion Power. So they will own and maintain it after this project is
Dominion,
complete.
they got anything to do with the election systems? Never mind, that was a joke. Okay.
Man, we can get it better.
No, we're not gonna go off topic there.
Okay, no wonder we got a problem. Okay, we're gonna fix it and give it to them.
Yes.
Why don't we just give it to them?
They don't want it in the current condition.
They won't take it.
But my question is, why aren't they responsible for it? If you just built a facility, you're telling the electrical folks, here's how you hook up. I don't quite get maybe I'm misunderstanding how big this system is. How many people does it serve and all that?
It serves the entire campus. So I mean,
Okay. All right, I got that. How big is the campus? I mean, how many people are we talking about?
Oh.
Units? Are there 20 buildings or something?
Yeah, I mean,
Is it
we've
like
probably got about 25 active buildings or so at Coastal Center. I mean, plus or minus a few. What's the population of Coastal Center? Somebody here probably knows better than I do on the resident count there. But yeah, I mean, it feeds the whole campus. So
On several of these campuses, we own all the infrastructure. So the Wick Center project that we're currently working on, that relates to the water system. So
PD Center.
back 1966 is when this was built. And I guess at that time, the city or county didn't take on the infrastructure project. That was part of our capital injection to build the campus. And that system's now 54 years old and is well beyond its useful life. And so we're trying to get out of maintaining. We don't have the money or the capabilities to maintain these public infrastructure systems that we have. So the Witt Center project, for example, is trying to get us how to maintain a wastewater plant and dams and all the other stuff on Witt.
If we built something brand new, all right, 2 miles away, but it's a brand new campus and everything, we wouldn't have our own grid system, would we? We'd just hook up with Dominion would come in, put the lines in.
Maybe just a couple, I was in one briefing, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, and I asked the same question, and what I walked away from the feeling was, Dominion said, look, it's like a house. We don't want to be responsible for the wiring in your house. We'll meet you at the street. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
So because there's so much liability in digging up old wires, so we basically have to rewire the campus. So, and that's where a cost comes from. And then they'll bring it to the street and they'll bring more of that type of equipment.
Yeah.
They don't want to be responsible for rewiring 25 buildings. So I think that's where we say the grid, I look at it as just rewiring old wiring.
Yeah, it's replacing the infrastructure to the transformers. We would still own from the transformers inside the building, but that's pretty typical. The larger infrastructure and grid in place is what we would hand over to them. And it's pretty similar like that. For instance, PD Center, we don't own any utilities at PD Center, sewage, water, or so, somewhere in the past, those have been handed over. It's kind of a mixture of DDSN ownership and city ownership at the other campuses. So,
So the deal, as part of what we're doing then is, okay, we're gonna get rid of all the upkeep and everything. So, but they say, but we don't want the ball unless you make it right, then we'll take it.
yes,
So part of the deal is they'll take it over.
yes.
And how much is this gonna cost?
It was 50, no, it was
It's
it?
1.3 million is the,
No, there was.
what's in your packet is just part of the fees associated with getting the project running. Architect, go ahead, Andrew, explain the difference.
Yeah, well, with reporting to downtown, we initially go in and ask for 1.5% of what we think the total budget's gonna be. That gets approved by the offices downtown, and I think in that situation, we're assuming, based on some previous estimates and stuff, that it's gonna be about 1.5. So we got approval, phase one approval to get 1.5% of that money to go hire a consultant to do the design and finish it out. So then we'll,
Basically, it costs 1.5 to do the whole.
yes,
kit and caboodle.
yeah.
And then we're done with it.
If they approve, if Dominion approved the work, they still have to approve the work.
I mean, it's sort of like some of these old neighborhoods where they pave their own roads and things like that, and then the county,
Yeah,
they ask the county 30 years in to take over the road, and the county won't take over the road because the road is degraded. And then the neighborhood, the HOA is responsible. I dealt with this in my whole neighborhood. The HOA is responsible for
yeah.
upgrading the road, so the county would say, okay, now it's in enough
That's a very
good shape.
It's good
for us
enough.
to come in
Well,
and do it.
that's a good analogy. I like that. That makes sense.
I had to deal with that in my own neighborhood, so.
Well, it sounded really, very, very right on, so, okay. All right, well, that answers my questions, I guess.
It's just a shame they didn't handle it right in the 1960s, but there's nothing we can do about that now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a shame. I mean, it's just unreal, but.
And there were different priorities. Like I said, just like some of these neighborhoods, the idea at that point in time was you didn't want to be necessarily part of a city grid or a county grid or something. There were reasons why they said you didn't want it back then.
Or they might not have had the infrastructure, the option might not have been there. So,
The other important thing to note is we're out of the maintenance business as well. Right now, we have to maintain this ourselves out of our budget, and we have to hire.
Well, I thought that was sort of the point. I mean, aside from it being necessary, I mean, my old house, that sounds like a TV show, but my old house needs to have a bunch of rewiring done too, and, I kinda get that. I mean, my wife keeps telling me the house is gonna burn down if we don't, so, okay, but you gotta prioritize stuff, and I would love to turn that over to somebody, so, okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So that was approved by the full committee?
Yeah.
So we'll treat that as a motion and second coming out of the committee. Any further discussion of the proposal? All in favor of approving the proposal as presented, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Next item, the contract amendment, $37,000.
Yes, so in our last committee, we approved, which is on tab 4, Babcock Center work and the amendment for the Babcock Center and the Tri-Development Center. Since we met, we've had an addition of CHS Group, which is the third item down, and that was not reviewed and discussed in the committee meeting, but we would need to approve that for today as a committee.
Which one is it?
This is tab 4. It's the contract amendments over 200,000 is the subject,
Last line, CHS.
and CHS Group is the last line on
So the reason that amendment is taking place is they are taking over home from another provider. And so there's a comparable subtraction from another provider's contract award that you don't see because we don't report the negatives. We're only reporting those over 200. So it's simply a transfer of funds from one provider to another.
So this is all of these then?
Yeah, so we approved the first two, everything that says Babcock Center and everything that says Tri-Development Center. We approved these spends in our committee meeting, and so we just need a full.
So somebody explain to me, and I apologize that I keep getting things confused with the term capitated and decapitated. What is capitated? Give me a definition of that again. I've gotten it one or two times, but I keep forgetting it.
It's our funding system. It's the bands that we're trying to get out of. It's just the terminology used where we have a dollar amount that we say it costs to serve a particular consumer.
Yeah.
And it's paid in prospectively to every provider based on data services. And it's a band system. And so when the bands are funded, when somebody moves into a program or moves out of a program, their bands are affected, and it's an amendment for that. So it's just primarily residential and day services, and then the band B and I that we're going to be discussing later today.
When you think of something that's when I'm just trying to maneuver definitions a little bit. Decapitated, I understand. That's something that's separated. Capitated would seem to be the opposite. And I'm trying to, is it relate anyway to a separation or a conjoining? I'm trying to understand the definition of capitated.
Correct. It's a bucket of services with aggregated funding. You're buying a bucket of, you're paying for a bucket of services.
That's your totality.
And they can move money around however they want. They can take
within the bucket.
Correct.
So we call that system capitated, or we call individual items within the bucket capitated?
The system is a capitated funding system.
All right.
So it consists of all the different bands, and we're trying to dismantle that.
That's right.
Part of what Ralph was talking about, his support to get out of this capitated system.
Okay.
All right. Fee for service.
Okay. I think.
You want to change the time, you want to change,
I need to think of this.
you want to change the term? You
No.
want to get rid of?
No. I think of this as like a stipulative definition. I've just got to get my mind around the stipulative definition and not try to relate it to another term. I think I'm confusing myself. All right, thank you very much.
Since we have an addition on there that's fairly significant, even though we had approval on the first two segments of that in committee, I think it probably would make sense to just have a fresh motion then, and second, and that we were voting on everything as opposed to depending on what came out of committee solely, just because that number's fairly big. So,
This does not, the adoption of this doesn't impact any of the fee for service proposals that we've got in front of us, does it?
No.
Okay. I want to get really good at this capitated system stuff before we do it.
Well, just when you get really good at it, we're gonna get rid of it.
That's right. But by the time we get rid of it, I will have understood completely.
We'll understand.
So, would then entertain a motion to approve the amendments as presented on this document.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that is approved unanimously.
The items, Chairman, could I ask, this is my typical question I ask at all the committee meetings. When is all this stuff posted? It will be posted within 2 days, a day?
It gets posted when, I believe, we post this right after the meeting? No, we get posted when the minutes are approved and then all the documentation goes out.
And if one wanted to see it online, one would go to DDSN, South Carolina Department of Disability Special Needs.
Commission, then
Underneath all the meeting notices, it says agendas, all
videos.
the documentation, everything's underneath that.
Yeah.
And it should be there.
It'll be there when the minutes are approved.
So the public will be able to actually see this next month.
That's right.
Yes,
Okay,
by next month.
very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item is tab 5, and it's the general duties of the DSN Internal Audit Division. As you might recall, this document was originally updated a few months ago, then it was put out for public comment, and then in our last meeting, we approved the version that's in behind tab 5, which is the new directive. and it was approved in the committee. So we just need the commission to vote on it.
Come out of committee, we will treat that as a motion and a second to approve. Do we have any discussion?
Is this what we discussed, the last time?
month.
Yes.
Yes.
Wasn't it?
Yeah,
Oh, that gets you, yeah, okay.
and it's the way we discussed, I mean, it's properly the way it came out of the finance committee.
Yeah, good, good.
Was there any further discussion with regard to the sanction section?
Yeah.
Any further questions? Barry?
It is fairly consistent with another policy that we have, by the way, executive limitations, I believe. I'll check that, and it seems consistent with that too.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, let the record reflect that that was approved 5-1.
I'm always interested in knowing if we're missing something.
It's the same issue that I had before, which is the extent of the sanctions. I don't agree with that, which is fine. I understand that people wanted to amend that. I didn't agree with that amendment.
Oh,
So-
we
Same
already
thing we talked
went
about.
over that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing we talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, the extent of the sanctions.
Yeah.
That's just my decision.
Moving on.
All right, yes, thank you, Commissioner Malthus. So next item on the agenda is the policy committee, starting with tab 6.
Oh, yes. That would be me.
That would be you.
Actually, it's gonna primarily be Susan, but I will, say that there's several items that I'm going to, kind of punt over to her. And the first one relates to the external review that is ready for approval on the crisis prevention, document that we've talked about many times in the policy committee.
So we're in tab 6 of your binders. Good morning, by the way. So we're talking about 56704, newly entitled DDSN Approved Crisis Prevention Curricula List and Curriculum Approved. So we're asking for your approval today. We've shared the final draft, which includes additional language for emphasis about prohibition of any techniques that would inhibit breathing. Committee members also discussed an external review period comments received regarding the listing of the approved crisis curriculums within the document rather than as done in the past, which was to include them as an attachment that could be amended as programs were reviewed and added. The committee determined it desired to retain the draft changes and are presenting for approval.
Thank you. So it comes out of committee. We'll treat that as both a motion and a second for approval of the proposed policy.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion or questions from the commission as a whole with regard to this policy?
All right. Question?
Yes, sir.
And we've sort of discussed extensively how to word this, and if everybody will look on page 2, this is what my concern is. Even though, I mean, I can live with it the way it is, I just don't think it's quite what I want. In the middle of the paragraph, in addition, DDSN, and maybe I'm just missing, does not approve training curriculum that include techniques involving use of forces, chokeholds, or cough air, in order to prevent breathing. That's good. That definition is good. I just does not approve. I mean, does that well, we don't approve of that kind of, that's not what we're approving. It's not that we're forbidding it. We're just not approving. So that we're not giving a positive recommendation, but gee, if you want to do it, we're not going to say anything much about it, but we're not approving that. I just don't like that. It just doesn't get where I want to get it. I want to forbid it. We DDSN rejects something stronger than that. Can y'all help me with this, please?
We can
We
get a-
struggle with this, we struggle.
We can get a different word in there, but you gotta keep in mind, we're putting in this policy, all the things they can and cannot do. Well, not cannot do, but all.
No,
the things they
cannot
can
do, that's the point, Chairman, that's the point, after what we saw this summer, I mean, I'm still mortified, and that it could be going on, conceivably, without a specific prohibition, that this board is saying no to chokeholds that will cut off air supply, period.
Now, the next sentence after that one does say only the techniques included in the approved course of use.
That helps, then that's.
Right, that's what it says. It says only the techniques approved, which we listed, and I listed them so that we wanted to list them so that people would know what was approved, and that was the only thing that was approved, is what it says. But if you wanna say, if we wanna use the word forbid in the top part, I guess we can, in the sentence, in the paragraph.
Does everybody not agree that, I mean, we should be.
I agree that we should be forbidding it, but I just think it gets us, I really think this gets us where we wanna go, because it tells them what they can, what they can do. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add something else, and I think Mary wants to maybe say the same thing I am, so let me see. But the intent of this directive is very narrow. It's to list that, basically to say we approve curriculum. Other directives exist which more comprehensively state that we use positive behavior supports. We do not do various things, but this is not really the directive that conveys the message in totality of what the agency's goals are for management of undesirable behaviors. This is, the intent was just to do that simple scope that I mentioned. So that language may be very important here, but it isn't the only way the commission has chosen and the agency has chosen to communicate about behavior.
If you read the purpose of the directive, it says it establishes the requirement for all South Carolina Department of Disabilities and Special Needs operated programs to choose and utilize a validated curriculum that have been approved by, if we want to put in there that we approve, so that when you get to that second paragraph, we won't approve anything that has those components. So you won't get to use it because you've got to use what we say you can use, and we're not going to approve that kind of system. So I think that's the whole idea, is the purpose is telling people, these are the ones that are approved, you got to use this list. We're not going to approve something that does that. But if you want to put another word in, that's fine.
Mr. Chairman, this is Commissioner Rawlinson. I just wanted to add that when the commission looked at this, there was some public comment, and the concern was that, as new curriculum became available, that we would not respond in a timely manner to look at that curriculum. And I just wanted to respond to that and just say that this is a different commission, and we do expect our staff to bring us any curriculum that's new. I mean, if there's something new that comes out, we want to hear about it. And and this commission will take action. This policy committee will take action on this policy should we need to update it. And I want that to be clear to those who commented that we are a lot more hands-on with this, and we are, like I said, willing to look at the options as they become available and as they are brought to us.
And there is a procedure in there for
Correct.
that.
Correct.
We can use the word prohibit where it says do not approve if you want to, David. I mean.
Well, I move that we modify it to say prohibits.
Okay.
There, to be very clear that our position on this is that you cannot have anything, and
Okay, well,
we're not gonna let you go there. Does not, I understand exactly what, director is saying, and she's exactly right. And it's kind of nuanced, and I think, Mary, I'm kind of coming at this from a lawyer perspective a little bit. And when it can be misread, and I saw that enough in the legislature in those old days. If it can be misread, it will be misread.
Well, I agree with that.
And I think if taken as a totality, I think it's exactly as Mary says. If you try to zero in on it and nuance it, it's almost like it's saying, now, we don't approve of this, and we got other ways to handle. Does that mean I can do it even though y'all don't approve of it? No, you gotta see the whole document. So Mary's right. But if it's nuanced in such a way, I can see the witness in the stand right now, they got this document in front of them, and the defense attorney says, well, you know, did the commission, Ms. Poole, did the commission prohibit the use of this? Well,
Yep.
you say, let's read it to the jury. Read this to the jury, please, director. You simply don't approve. That doesn't mean disapprove, does it? And he walks away and stares at the jury, and the jury says, why did they make that clearer? You know, and then it becomes a defense document. Now, there's a defense lawyer right there. He does defense work too. Am I exaggerating too much?
Where it says.
Yeah,
Always blame it on the defense attorney. Always blame it on the defense.
Hey, let me say this, easy way to do this. Where it says in addition DDSN, in the first paragraph under page 2, we'll just, instead of saying it does not approve, we'll just say prohibits criteria that it does not include. So we just use the word prohibit where it says do not approve.
Well, there is a motion to amend the document as presented to insert the word prohibit where it says does not approve. Do we have a second as to that motion?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion just with regard to that amendment? Hearing none, all in favor of that amendment, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that amendment alone is approved. Any further discussion with regard to the policy as a whole?
Should you change it?
And so since we did that amendment, and it's different than what was approved by the committee, I would then seek to have a motion to approve the amended policy this time.
I move that we approve the amended policy.
Commissioner Malphurs, we have a second.
It's permanent as of the end of the day today.
Say all.
Second.
Second, Commissioner Malphurs. Any further discussion as to the policy as a whole? If not all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that amended policy is approved. Staff is clear on that amendment. Make sure that gets on there. Okay. All right.
Send it to me, and then we'll get done with it, please.
Okay. We'll have it at the end of the meeting. Okay.
Moving on to tab 7.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm just saying, ask him to give me a copy of it when the meeting's over, so we'll have it.
Sure.
Because I'm trying to fix this problem. Thank you, go ahead, sorry.
No, back to you. Next, tab 7, the standard first aid cardiopulmonary resuscitation
Yes.
policy.
Okay.
Susan's gonna take that one.
Yes.
Thanks, Susan.
So 60404DD, standard first aid with CPR, was referred October 13th from Policy Committee for staff delegation, was posted for external review, and is ready for commission review for approval. The external review period ended November 13. No comments were received. The revised draft submitted for approval includes clarification that direct services and supports do not include case management or waiver case management or intake. Those are not direct services, so that was added. So we're requesting approval of the final draft.
And that was approved by the commission, or
This
the committee rather?
it was delegated to staff.
Was, right, just staff.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. So, would then entertain a motion to approve the policy as presented.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
Commissioner Thomas, I saw it just before you, Commissioner Robinson. He was a little bit quicker on the draw. Any further discussion with regard to the proposed policy? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that policy is now approved. Moving on to tab 8, 36702DD, IT products and services.
Yes, acquiring IT products and services was referred by committee to staff delegation, Was posted for external review through the 13th of November. No comments were received. The revisions, in summary, add clarification about points of approval and process. And this directive points to DDSN central office, DDSN regional centers, and DDSN operated community settings. We're requesting approval of this draft.
So move.
Thank you, Commissioner Malphurs. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'm gonna let Commissioner Rawlinson get this one on you.
David.
Do we have any further discussion with regard to this proposed policy? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Chairman, could I
Yes.
ask a little point of clarification?
Absolutely.
Well, what we are doing here is adopting policies that I presume fit in the category of internal policies that we're adopting for DDSN. What weight that carries relative to state regulations is a matter. At some point, I would like for our attorney to address us. We're not going through a regulatory system that's established by the state, so you have your code, and then you submit regulations. Agencies submit regulations that they have worked on, and it is a merger of the code that carries elements to it that the code itself may not specifically have, but that are adopted, and it carries the weight of law. Those are submitted to the legislature adopts those, House and Senate got to approve them both, and it's a fairly complicated system for whether they get kickback, time for modification, all that stuff. Now, this is not that. This is sort of internal rules we got, and I want to make sure everybody sort of understands from a kind of legal perspective. If you want to, this is not a reg. And exactly what its status is, I'm not quite sure. What is this animal that we're passing? It's something that we're going to follow. And in theory, does it carry the weight of law? If you were in front of an administrative judge, for instance, Gary, do you think that, this would be something that is being followed, but somebody's challenging some action? Now, I'm asking the question not as just an intellectual exercise, but this is a good test question on a bar exam. But I'm asking the question because if it doesn't carry the weight of law and we want it to carry the weight of law, let's say Pat says, well, gee, we need this as law, or Chris or Mary, then we would have to submit reg proposals and to the legislature. And I'm wanting y'all to keep, as staff, to keep this in mind, that what we're doing is some kind of creature we're creating, but it's not a regulation, I don't think. Now, would the court think of this, and if I were a judge, I even contemplated this way, well, Judge Thomas, it hasn't gone through regulatory process, but we want you to admit this as evidence in this case relative to, because this is their standard that they adopted, and I could just hear the discussions, and I would say, gee, why didn't they submit this? And if they wanted this as a reg in the power of law, why didn't they submit it? And so I would ask all kinds of embarrassing questions of our lawyers, or whatever. So keep in mind what my argument is from at least one lawyer, and this is our chairman is a much better lawyer than me. But
administrator side,
but this thing of the law and regulations, if you all want something out of this that you think is going to have the effect of law, you better make sure, and then let's sit down with our counsel and see what we want to submit to the. So far, I hadn't seen that. If we've sent things as reg proposals, we haven't passed. Yeah, I was oblivious to it or whatever. But pick them out, and then let's shuffle them off to the legislature to be adopted as regulatory.
And I can tell you, I think in the past when we've done that, the primary reason why we haven't done policies that way is because of how inflexible the regulatory process is.
Yep.
To get something approved as a reg is much more difficult and gives us a lot less flexibility as a commission to amend things and make them policies that we operate under. And that's it's an internal law as opposed to an external.
Chairman, if the legislature want to give you a hard time about it, that's fine. You just pull them back and keep operating like you've been operating.
Right.
If they want to be obtuse about some of that, or they misunderstand something, that to us seems very obvious, because a lot of this is staff-oriented obvious that we just need to do. And usually they're not gonna give you a hard time over that. It would have to be something that would be a spin-off from the code, that they say you're exceeding the code. Now that would get their attention. But anyway, all right, that's just that's just thrown out mainly for staff observation for me, and I might be completely
And a
wrong.
lot of this is, we're looking at, so people don't go off buying their own printers and buying their own toners. We
Yeah.
try to run through
Yeah.
this is really more of a procedural. We have to operate under the law, which is the state procurement policy. So, and we want one point person to be able to funnel that through. That's what this is. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
I think 95% of it would never arise to the level of the issue that I'm talking about, but it could be for your benefit as administrators of what we're doing, that you need it to be a reg. So just, because it ain't law. It ain't law.
And we want to have that discussion when we talk about licensing standards. We really want to have that discussion, and we do have 4 regs that are ready to go. That's part of the agenda today.
The commission just needs to know that what we're passing here is not the law of the state of South Carolina. Okay?
It's the policy of the agency.
There you go. Okay.
But the problem with making something regular, I'm not a lawyer, don't get me wrong, my brother is, and I'm not really, but, I think it makes it nearly impossible to change once you make it a regulation, and that's just something that I would want to stay away from as much as we could.
There's that other side of it, Barry. You're right. You're right.
It's gonna be impossible, just like this document that we were talking about just a minute ago with the chokehold thing. It would be if that was a regulation, it'd be impossible to change it, and we wanna change it and add something to it whenever they have a different, if they do in years to come have a different way to do that. So it's just a lot of things that we need to be able to change around here that we could never change if they were a regulation. And that's the problem with making a regulation a license, which is a whole other story, that we allowed them to do that, to make that those licensing standards regulations, because they're gonna be impossible to change now.
The bottom line is that if there were an issue before a judge of the way I see things, if you weren't doing something that was a policy, I would rule it as admissible as evidence that it fit in the category of a regulation, and would give it to the jury, but I would let it come in and let the Supreme Court overturn me. But I mean, that's why we do have to be really, really careful with this stuff and very precise.
I think it could come in as I think you're absolutely right, but I think, as far as I'm concerned, they can bring it in, because I mean, it's what we do and what we need to do and what we are doing.
Yeah, I think he or she judge is gonna admit it in as evidence, and then weight it, jury's gonna weight it, but I'd let it in as evidence, and so we gotta be, well, anyway, I apologize for getting off subject, but I think everybody just sort of needs to know what the animal is.
I think there's been more than one deposition where the policies have been brought before the executive director or the chairman of the commission to say, this is what y'all's policy is, right?
It's not policy.
As well as right. Okay, so I think, unless I miss my guess, before we started that discussion, that we'd taken a vote with regard to.
We get finished that vote.
Right, with regard to, 36702DD. So I just to restate it, because I've kind of lost it. All in favor of approving that, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that proposed policy is approved unanimously. Moving on to tab 9, 36732DD, information security and privacy.
Yes, so 13 information security directives were referred to staff for delegation, and through the revision process, it was determined that those 13 could be compiled, which is this new directive 36732DD. It was posted for external review, which expired November 13th. No external review comments were received. Again, this is a compilation of 13 directives requiring the policy portion to be published in compliance with our work with the South Carolina Division of Information Security's Information Security and Privacy Standards. So we relied heavily, obviously, on our Chief Information Security Officer for this revision. We are requesting approval at this time.
And so our IT folks weighed in heavily on this. This was,
They're the authors.
They wrote it.
okay,
Information security coordinate also with IT.
okay.
The best thing about it is we get rid of 13 policies and make it one.
That's certainly an advantage. I just want to make sure the IT folks check in. Being married to one all too often, they don't get included when these sorts of things are done.
The new way we're doing it is it's going out to them first.
Good.
So move that we approve the policy.
Okay, motion from Commissioner Malphurs. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackwood.
Chairman,
Any questions?
I apologize, why aren't we using, you said it, I guess I missed it, why aren't we using the fact that came out of committee to be a?
This one did not come out of committee. It was,
Out of staff?
Out of staff.
Gotcha.
Right, so we
Okay.
did not.
We referred it to staff a couple of months ago, David.
Yeah, okay.
And so that's why we're doing this.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, then that is approved unanimously. So then going to tab 10, the remaining multiple policies listed there under tab 10.
Yes, my recommendation would be that we'd handle 100-11 separate from the next group, but we could do it in 2 actions. Is that your preference?
That's, if you feel that's appropriate, that's absolutely fine. So 111 is the absence with leave of district director or facility administrator from duty station.
Yes.
Duty station.
So again, that's tab 10. This was referred for staff delegation, and through that review, we're proposing that this be marked obsolete, and the position of that it is no longer needed. It reflects elimination of the district director positions. For facility administrator, this requirement already exists in section 602D of the standards for licensing intermediate care facilities for individuals with intellectual disabilities. We call those ICFs, IID, the regulation 61-13. So it's not necessary, and again, we're recommending that be marked obsolete. So we're asking for approval.
Chairman, so move.
Thank you, Commissioner Rollinson. Do we have a second?
Second.
I heard Commissioner Malphurs first, so he'll be the second. Any further discussion about just the 100-11-DD policy? And that motion is to mark as obsolete.
Correct. Mark it off. We're going on our obsolete list, which we're making a long list of, which is good.
All in favor of rendering it obsolete, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? So that motion carries. So then the next grouping from 36709DD down to 36729DD as indicated on the minutes.
Yes, I'm asking for a group motion to mark these obsolete. You've already approved the new information security directive, so these would be repetitious to keep. We've compiled all necessary information, so nothing's lacking, and feel that's the best recommendation to mark obsolete.
We have a motion to then mark this grouping as a whole as obsolete.
So motion.
I had Commissioner Blackwood first in the race. Does anyone want a second?
Second.
Commissioner Malphurs, thank you. Any further discussion with regard to these possibilities? Hearing none, all in favor of marking these as obsolete, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, those will be marked as obsolete. That motion carries. Any other committee business from either finance or policy to update us on?
I have a few comments, and then I believe Commissioner Malphurs has one too about policy committee. Would you like us to go first, or do you have?
Sure, I don't have any.
Okay.
Nothing from finance.
Okay. Okay, good. Just a moment of celebration. So when policy committee began its new review process, remember we had 180 directives and standards and policies of the commission. And our goal on a 4-year review cycle is to do about 45 a year. So at this point in the fiscal year, with your votes today, you've completed 18 complete reviews, and we've also marked 18 directives obsolete. So my math says that's 36. We have a lot more months to go, and we will definitely exceed our 45 for the year, but that just shows a lot of gains by the commission, and clearly a lot of efficiencies have been put in place. So from staff, we appreciate that.
That's a good side. The bad side is how many months do we go without any review?
Or we're catching up. Well, we can't change history.
We want to thank the staff, because to review all these policies and directives that are sitting on top of one another takes an inordinate amount of time and effort to make sure you're not missing something that does need to stay, and to cross-reference it to regulations, whether it's the ICF regulations, whether it is state regulations that are already there, whether it's licensing, is a big project. And they've done a really good job with it.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. That was not in any way meant, what I said was not in any way meant to be a shot at staff. Sorry, if that came across in any way. That was more a comment on our failing as a commission and our inability to review stuff.
Oh, break too.
Yeah.
Well, one thing is.
Not since the current policy committee has been in place.
Not since, yes, the current policy committee has done
And-
It is a much different environment.
And there were reviews still going on in the background, so we didn't have 100% full stop. So it's helped us queue up to really get a fast start. And we even started in June before the fiscal year actually started, and you can see that. So thank you so much. Again, I just want to say something positive. I do have a couple other comments. The committee in November reviewed the major directive, obtaining healthcare consent regarding healthcare, making healthcare decisions. That's 53507. Some of you commissioners have spent a lot of time with that in the past. This is associated with the Adult Healthcare Consent Act and advanced directives. So that version was approved by committee and was posted for external review for 20 business days. Typically we do 10. We wanted to offer a little bit more time. That will expire November 15th. The external review comments received will be reviewed by policy committee at the January committee meeting, and we'll see where to go after that. But you'll be seeing that again, and certainly hope that everyone will review it. Also, 4 different directives were referred to Finance Audit Committee at the November 10th meeting. So Commissioner Blackwood and certainly Chris Clark are very active in reviewing those, and will be dealing with that in their committee before it comes back to commission. And then lastly, I wanted to say on November 10th, we also referred another directive for staff review. There's no action at this time. And that focuses on the use of DDSN regional center facilities by outside groups and off-duty employees. So that concludes my section of this report, and I'm handing it back to Commissioner Malthus.
Commissioner Malthus.
Thank you, ma'am. Susan was kind enough to do all that for us today, because those were primarily, obviously, referred to staff. We have, because of the amount of work that we've been doing in the past, since the new committee took over, we have decided to take the month of December off to allow the staff to catch up to us, and our next committee meeting will be January 12th. But between that time, I'm never off, so Susan and I will be talking to decide what the next 6 months worth of what the plan is for the policies over the next half of this fiscal year. And I do thank everybody for their efforts and service in this regard, and particularly those with staff and commission members, because all of these are read, believe it or not, by those in the committee, and we are very diligent about trying to get them correct and trying to make them consistent with what we are, more consistent with what we're trying to do, which will be talked about more in January when we have the next set of things brought. This next set of regulations brought to you. Policies brought to you. Thank you.
What time on the 12th?
Oh, it's 3.
3 is there, okay. Trying to get it on my calendar now so it doesn't. All right. Thank you very much to everybody on the policy committee for you guys hard work.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on, next item on the agenda, we're moving into old business, is the HHS administrative contract. I think Chris is going to make a presentation, and did you want to bring, John in? Yeah, Director Baker.
They can hear me from there just fine, Chris.
We're doing a lot of talking for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure, do you need, you?
This is Joshua Baker.
Joshua, this is Gary Lamel over at DDSN. How are you doing this afternoon, or this morning, I guess it is still?
I'm doing well, thank you. How are you?
Doing just fine. We got you on speakerphone for the open commission meeting. We are ready to start talking about the administrative contract, giving the update on that. Chris, did you want to start with that, or do we want to start with? Do we want to recognize Director Baker to start with?
I do, but I just want to say why it's an old business. It's an old business because we're talking about the contract that goes back to 2014. So I had a hard time putting that in new business. We've been talking about it for a very long time. So I will let Director Baker go ahead and state as to why we are talking about a contract that goes back in 2014. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I think that, the contract before you, and then there will be another one coming, I think, shortly hereafter, it is an agreement between the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, the single state agency for the administration of all Medicaid activities in the state, including the 1915 C waivers you will operate, and the South Carolina Department of Disability and Special Needs, which is established in our waiver documents and arguably in statute as the operator of several waivers for home and community-based services. This contract is important really for two reasons. The first is it represents an agreement between the two state agencies, one in the cabinet and one not, on the expectations and standards and activities that you will undertake in helping us administer these waivers and some services that are under the state plan. And two, it sets the basis for which allowable costs are administrative versus costs that are allowable as rates paid for services. That's important because the federal government, CMS, gives us different amounts of dollars or reimburses us in different ratios based upon the types of activities there are. Historically, we just sort of paid a rate, and DDSN would retain some portion of that to cover the administrative cost of central office many years ago at this point, but several years prior to when the work on this contract started. CMS cried foul, said you need to separate these costs out. The directors at the time signed a letter of intent to enter into an administrative contract, but never actually did it. And so what's before you is a contract, and I believe a cover letter I sent to Director Poole, in short saying, to the best of our knowledge, this reflects the costs and the standards and activities that were undertaken at the time from 2014 to 2020, June 30th of 2020, and ratifies what has been a decades-long operating structure between our two agencies. What this allows us to do, it helps Chris finish the cost reports. We can finish our certified public expenditure reconciliation. It allows us to set the standards for costs so we can review the rates. I heard earlier in the commission meeting that not only from commissioners, from staff, but also in public comment, that there's great interest in continuing to unwind the partially capitated system that's in place, transition that to a fee-for-service, and separating administrative and service costs are important to doing that. So this ratifies that agreement for that period of time. And then the next contract you're going to receive is an updated version for the current fiscal year we're in. And then hopefully by February or March, you will have a contract for the next fiscal year. So for the first time in roughly a decade, the commission will be presented with a contract to approve prior to the start of the performance period, as opposed to substantially after that period has commenced or even concluded.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Director Baker? And just to be clear, when you say ratified, basically the way we have interpreted that in the past within this agency, it's sort of stuff has already happened and we're just marking our approval on it. We're not expecting to have any shift of funds based on this contract because those funds have already sort of been accounted for in these prior years. In other words, we're not paying you any money under this contract. You're not paying us any new money under this contract. It's all ratifying money that's already come through the system, correct?
So I'm going to say yes with an asterisk, and then Chris may want to brief you. It is correct that no additional activity will take place on the basis of this contract being ratified, because we believe the funds have already gone to the agency in the form of our service rates. There is that asterisk, though, that the regime of the financing regime that is used is what's called a certified public expenditure method, and as opposed to what we do for other services, which is called an intergovernmental transfer. What certified public expenditure means for you all, and if I'm telling you something you already know, I apologize, but it is that you accumulate costs, or you expend money and you have costs that you incur. We provide you with interim reimbursement during that period of time. And then at the end of that performance period, there's a reconciliation based on your cost reports. If we gave you more reimbursement, or really acted as a pass-through for federal reimbursement, than you incurred in cost, we would be obligated to recoup those monies and return them to the federal government. It is our understanding, certainly for the administrative contract, that should not be the case. But I think Chris is going to give you an update on where the cost reports are. It is not outside of the realm of possibility that there may be some future recoupment, but again, we just believe that to be unlikely right now.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions?
Director Baker.
Yes, sir.
This is Ed Miller. How are you?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you?
Haven't heard your voice in a while.
I know we try to stay quiet here at HHS if at all possible, but it's good to speak with you, sir.
So basically, so that I'm clear, you are saying that there are possible new discoveries that could come about dealing with the asterisk?
So I would say, sir, and Chris can explain to you how we're handling that. It's unrelated to the contract. So to the chairman's point, this contract, ratifying the contract in and of itself won't spur any exchange of funds, but this contract and the services that are subject to the certified public expenditure regime still are subject to retrospective review. So I didn't want to be, I know that's kind of a fine point, but I wanted to be clear that the signing of the contract does not exclude it from a retrospective review or audit. It just means to the chairman's point that these dollars have gone and these activities have already happened, and we're just acknowledging that occurred in a manner that's consistent and appropriate with respect to federal regulation and the waivers, and is more an acknowledgement of events that have taken place as opposed to any additional action that's going to take place because the contract has been ratified.
It's clear, appreciate it. Keep working Brian Cost, don't working too hard.
Thanks, sir.
And keep up your good work, sir.
All right, anything else for the director? Anything from staff that you guys want to?
I just appreciate him coming on because this is really a difficult topic because of going backwards. And again, we will talk about the cost reports and give you an update on that.
Yeah, as well as the new admin contract.
That's right.
He spoke to the past one that worked. So that's in here is part B, if you will, that I need to go over.
Okay, so let me clarify. This just carries us through the current year, is that correct?
Last fiscal year, June 2020.
Okay, so in fiscal year 2020, okay.
So the admin contract we talk about now goes back to July 1, 2020 through
June 2025.
June 2020. Oh, that's right, because it's a 5-year contract.
All right, and this, let me just verify, this does relate to the cost reports that we're missing, correct?
Indirectly,
Okay.
yeah, there is Josh still on?
Josh?
I sure am.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll take the lead and then you jump in if you need to supplement or correct me. We've only filed under the period that this covers, we've only filed 16 and 17's cost reports at this point.
Okay.
16 is currently under review still with HHS. We just sent them on November 4th, the 17 contract. What Director Baker's saying is, you know, once we get those submitted, if our administrative costs within those costs are not sufficient, we can have a situation as it relates to this particular contract. But our review of our administrative costs, Pat and I have looked at it a good bit, is we feel comfortable that our administrative costs are sufficient to not require a settlement with HHS. Now, on the service side, it's a whole nother matter. And so I don't know what costs look like back in 13. We're working on that now, but I'm kind of getting into another topic here too.
That's fine, that's fine. All right, I just wanted to make sure that we're headed in the right direction as far as, you know, the cost reports are concerned, and that this is going to take care of the past so that we can move forward and be on time and move forward.
That is the goal, Stephanie.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure.
Well, I want to hear from, is he still on?
Director Baker?
I am, sir.
Stephanie just had, Commissioner Rawlinson just made a statement about making sure we're not in Dutch with your agency relative to cost reports and everything. Are we on track?
So, Commissioner, I would say that more work's been done in about the past 18 months to really drive towards completing this than had been done in years prior. Across many directors and administrations, your staff and your director have been cooperative, forthcoming, transparent, and diligent in moving to this. It's a slow process, and we're making up for work that should have already been done. So we're plugging along, right? We're getting in the right direction. There are still technical compliance issues, but I'd say, Commissioner, that as long as this effort continues in this direction and we continue to make progress, it is not my intention to take any adverse action because the goal is to get the work done.
I'm too old to go to jail, so
I don't think that's where we are, sir. I don't think that's where we are at all.
Gary's not. Gary's very young, so.
Yeah, I'm not, thanks. Thanks for throwing me to the lions.
We are doing everything we need to do to.
You want to?
Well, I want you to know that the staff's on board, and I'm glad to hear it. But you got a commission that is pretty hyper about this. So I think you got a commission that is absolutely in sync to try to get this done right and fast.
Excellent. We are too.
Yeah. And sort of the side note, Josh, sort of going prospectively rather than retroactively. Why?
So,
we know the flaws that happen within the agency about the commission not being properly informed about the cost reports. would it ever have been something that anybody on your side of things would have maybe, would they ever come to the commission and say, hey, you guys are missing this?
I mean, I can't speak for, certainly can't speak for prior directors. I know from, I'm not shy about that, and would be happy to if I felt things were not going in a good direction. We would certainly make you aware. I will just say though, Mary and I speak pretty regularly and pretty frankly. I just don't see that being a problem. Right now.
I'm glad to hear that, but I also want you to know, I'm speaking on behalf of everybody in this commission, what you said at first, which is, if there's something like that that's not getting through to us, that you think is not getting through to us, you feel free to reach out to us from your perspective, from your side as well. Because the last thing that everybody sitting here wants to be is to get that same news of, oh, by the way, these reports haven't been done in half a decade, and now we got to dig out of this enormous hole that should have never happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I would.
So just to sort of let you know that. And yeah, I'm not expecting there's any problem. I know you and Mary talk all the time. Not expecting there to be any problem at all. That's not a comment at all towards staff right now. I just want you to know, and for everybody out there, that we want to know if there's a problem about anything.
Good. It was really a travesty from the person that took Chris's job, from the person that was before Chris's job, but we won't go there.
There were a number of travesties, yes. There were at many levels, unfortunately. But
And I'm with the chairman, I sing tenor.
So would you like to speak about the admin contract going forward?
Yes.
Briefly.
Yeah, I think that would be a
online.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
All right, so we have been in negotiation in regards to the current contract working through, again, which is effective back to July 1st. It has not been executed yet, but we are very close to an agreement where we can execute it. It's very favorable. I feel it's very fair. One thing I like about it is there is a cost settlement opportunity where if we underestimate our administrative costs, there is a two-way settlement built in there. Of course, we still want to monitor and manage our admin. We don't see that as a blank check, which I think is part of the problem with the initial two-way settlement that HHS eliminated. So we're working on, and this is kind of the weird thing you got to wrap your head around, is we do a lot of Medicaid services here, but this is only related to the waivers. And so there are other ICF contracts, early intervention, different services, Greenwood Genetic Center, a lot of different services that are administrative. So this admin contract is only related to the three waivers: head and spinal cord injury, community supports, and IDRD, intellectual disabilities. And so what this contract requires, though, is if they're going to actually pay us a quarterly estimate, if you will, so we're going to estimate, we have the cost settle, they'll pay us quarterly, is my understanding, once we execute this, retro to July. We have to also give them assurances that we haven't taken anything off the top in regards to rate splitting with the providers. If Dr. Director Baker mentioned that the way we've historically paid for our admin is we've taken some off the top, put it in our back pocket, and that's how we were supposed to get administrative costs. So we can't continue doing that. Of course, we currently are doing that. So here we are in November and we're still splitting rates. So as we look at option 2, a little bit later on Band B and I, we're pulling in to that option. This admin contract is part of what's triggering that option that we're presenting to you when we get to that. So the admin contract that we're talking about right now, when we get to this and we start talking about split rates, it's because this admin contract is going to be executed.
And we don't
Anything to add to
need to
that?
split rates anymore because we'll be getting paid through the admin contract.
But
That's
only
what
for
it is.
waiver services. So
That's
we will
right.
still be split rate with early intervention and ICS potentially. So there's, we're working on those as well. But this contract is just for waiver services.
And I think that the argument about how much that split rate actually was has been one of the things that, at least within the lawsuits, has come up most frequently. The further away we can get from doing that and just have a separate administrative contract, the better off we are.
It's cleaner and more transparent.
It's so, and that's one of the biggest, is you, depending on who you talk to, that claim is that we were taking 0.001% to like 20% based on who you talk to. So I'm thrilled to hear that, just from a litigation standpoint, nothing else. Yeah. Anything else that we need Director Baker for then with regard to this?
Unless he has a comment on the 2021.
Anything from your end, Director Baker, on that?
Yep, I think we're good to go. I just appreciate the commission's time this morning and your support.
Thank you for being here as well. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
morning.
So, I would ask, for a motion to be able to sign that contract.
And this is for the retroactive contracts only, not the one that we're still working on for. Okay? So would entertain a motion to approve the retroactive proposed contract with the HHS regarding the administrative contract.
So move or second, whoever comes
That
first.
would be a first from Commissioner Thomas. We have a second.
Second.
Commissioner Miller. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any abstentions, or any opposed, sorry. Any abstentions? Hearing none, that is approved unanimously. Thank you, staff. Good work on that. Next
I
up.
had champagne.
Yeah.
It's been so long.
Yes, far too long.
I know.
Okay, next item on the agenda is the band B&I switch to fee-for-service update. Recognize President Act.
Right. Well, I'll take the lead, but I'll have to rely a lot on my confidant over here probably to fill in some gaps. You guys have a document that was provided in your packet, and I didn't want to sit here and go over all that in detail. I'm going to talk generally about a few things, and then we can dive in where commissioners feel we need to get into specifics. First thing I'd like to say is, we've been working with the commission on this project since, I think, May. When COVID hit, it became really important that we look at this. So commissioners have heard a lot about this, have seen a lot of things as we've gone through this project. So that's one of the reasons I feel like we don't need to rehash some of the details in here. I also want to thank a lot of staff who are involved in this. While I might be the spokesperson here, Pat drafted this document with a lot of input from Mary and I. Rufus has been involved, our IT department, folks in fiscal, so it's been a team effort. And I just want to thank them publicly for all their effort that they have put into this. Also, one thing to note is we are using baseline data from 2019, and I think that's worth discussing and why we landed on 2019. One thing is, providers have 12 months to bill Medicaid, and part of the waiver services are direct billed providers. So you've got providers out there that are running their own companies, and they do take sometimes up to 12 months to bill. So if we look at fiscal year 2020 data, which is our other fiscal year that's completed, that's current, there's a high likelihood that there's missing services when we look at that. Additionally, the COVID impact goes without saying that it's wreaked havoc in our ability to rely on any type of data for 2020 because it's all over the place. If you look at March and April, we were virtually shut down. So how do you estimate an impact from that? So we landed on 2019 data. We involved providers that were nominated from their associations. Both the Coalition and the Human Service Providers Association was represented. That we had 10 providers at the table, or 25% of those affected by this change. And I want to thank their role and their involvement in helping us work through options. And in fact, option 2 is one they recommended in one of our first meetings, tossed it out as an idea. So they were very instrumental in picking apart our plan and making sure that we're looking at everything properly as we move forward. Let's see. Our options were developed considering a few things. First of all, our overall goal to convert all at-home services to fee-for-service. We need to ensure that whatever solution we land on, we don't destabilize the network. When you talk about that, what do I mean by that? If you look at We call it the gap fund, so let me explain what the gap is. The gap is if we take all the revenues that we pay out to providers for these two bands, Band B and I, these are folks that live at home receiving services, some day services, and then a lot of personal care aid, respite, and things of that nature. And then subtract all the paid claims from Medicaid for those same services that are funded. Some boards had to put in the board that was impacted the most by this detrimentally had to put 21.7% extra funds out of their other services. So they had to rob Peter to pay Paul. They had to take money from their residential and day bands to sustain the B's and I's. So in fact, they weren't adequately funded for these two bands based on the underlying services that were being paid. We have the other end of the scale is a 36.4% profit, if you will, where we've got all this funding and they're able to then take that money because they're not spending it for these people and use it to fund their day program and residential programs. So you can see there's a broad diverse, it's 57%, 58% if you take the plus and minus. The average that folks were retaining is about a 10.2% surplus. So if you take their band B and I and look at statewide average, about 10.2% of all revenues they were able to use and put into other services and help sustain those other things. Talk dollar amount, the board that was most impacted detrimentally had $786,000 of their own, not their own money, but money from other bands to sustain these two bands or take a loss or use reserves. And on the other end of the scale, almost $1.2 million in surplus that they could use in other programs. So again, that's a $2 million difference between those two. We also need to consider that the rates with Health and Human Services are not adequate. They've atrophied over the years, as we've seen. Pat and I've been involved, and Mary is too, analyzing these rates, and we've talked to you a lot about our rates needing a lot of work. Just since I've been here, there's things that should be added to the rate that we've been unsuccessful getting added. But, we are plugged in with Josh and his team, and they are, working with us. Also, if you look at our cost reports, as well as the Mercer study, they indicate that rates are a problem for residential and day. Now, day, that's a whole nother topic with the Mercer, but there were some failed assumptions in that study they did, and the HHS agrees. And then also COVID, we need to factor in that in our solution. We also considered that we need to do pass-through rates required to be in compliance with the new administrative contract once it's signed. Additionally, we need to consider the cash position and the health of individual providers as we land on a recommendation. Just to make an example, if we take this board that is making $1.2 million on these bands and we say, okay, we're not giving you that anymore, essentially they're losing that out of their bottom line. And if they're already break even or have no cash or whatever, that board's not going to be around. They're basically going to be out of business. That's the real reality of it. So with all that being said, we ran a bunch of scenarios. Well, 3 are here, but we've looked at a lot of different things as we landed on these 3. And we presented these to the provider network, as you heard Jason mention. I do believe that the folks that chose option 1, at least one of those persons I've been communicating with email, and she wasn't one of the providers in the room. And so she misunderstood something about it, and I don't think she would say option 1 anymore, but I wasn't able to finalize that discussion before this meeting through email.
And just as a follow-up to that, it's my understanding that we did reach out to the human services provider with regard to your request, Stephanie, and they actually they prefer to keep it anonymous how everybody voted within their group. So we don't have who voted which way, we just have the raw number.
So as we presented these options to this group, we did ask them to not look at this from a personal impact and how it impacts their county alone, but to look at it as a representative for all the providers they represented, and I feel they did that. I feel they really were open-minded and weren't just looking at their line, you know, and seeing how it impacts them. Of course, they're going to look at it, but I think they did do a good job balancing how they viewed it. So with all that being said, we're landed on option 2, and that's the one that's highly recommended and supported by the association. I think they said 27 of the votes were in support of option 2, and I think 7 of option 3. Now, of course, option 3, I'm surprised not more voted for option 3, because option 3 is throwing a lot of new money into the system. So I think that speaks volumes about our provider network and where they are on this, because they're not just looking for a paycheck. Because if I'm a provider, I'm sitting there going, well, if I go 3, I'm going to get a lot more money because it is adding additional dollars in the system. So to hear that they landed on 2 is very impressive and commendable to me. If we go through option 2, we'll talk about that in detail, but underlying that, well, you need to understand that the solution is a temporary solution. If you agree with that option being implemented, there's a lot of work to be done still. We've got to really get busy with HHS and try to get our residential and day rates adjusted so that, again, the underlying thought process you have to have here is, okay, I'm having to take money from this service and use it in another service because that rate is inadequate. So there's an imbalance in the system, not for every provider, but as a whole, where they need the money off of these bans to make ends meet on these other services. And all 3 of us recognize it.
Say that last sentence again. They need the money from these bans to say that again?
The ends meet with those other services.
So they're shifting funds then?
Yes, that's a capitated.
Yeah, that's the capitated issue. Well, how do we know? What kind of control do we have off of where they're shifting the money to?
It's all up to them.
Well, maybe that's why we're having problems getting people to be accepted by that. That was the question that came up a long time ago in my mind. You know, that there's no incentive to them. And so we got people that aren't being taken into the program because there's no incentive for them to come up with a way to service the various individuals on the waiting list.
And if you remember, when we had this discussion about, flipping that ban BNI and how much analysis is going to have to be done, when we see a large gap or additional funds there sloshing around in that system, we need to say, are you using them? What are you using them for? Some people are banking them, so their structure, their organizational structure is living within the means of that. Is that because it's good management, or you're not serving high management people, or you have adequate funding? Or is it because if you're needing to use that money over here, so we're looking at the ones with large gaps and low bank accounts to say, why aren't you able to save that money? What are you using it for? So maybe we have an acuity issue, which we have to go in and address, that they don't have proper funding and people aren't in the right acuity levels they need to be, or it could be a management issue. We're going to have to look at that. So it's an analysis that needs to move forward. So this will give us the time to turn that gap money into actual revenue based on the acuity of the people and the needs of the individuals as we move forward.
Is this a place at which we need the internal auditor helping us out at this point to determine that capitated issue of not knowing how that money is being used in the relationship? Because this hits on the very essence of what we're here for. And we are here to serve people who have needs. And so this is like the crux of the issue for me in my first year as a commissioner, and dealing with this issue. And I know everybody out there, they got their own businesses with the associations or the providers, rather, the providers. But this is, sometimes you have to adjust. You have to adjust your business model.
And the answer to your question is a yes and a no. I would think that he could monitor our processes, how we're looking at this and making sure that we're taking everything into account. But as far as skill level to look at acuity of an individual, that's not in his wheelhouse. That would be more in our programmatic people. But he can watch the process, which is what I would recommend. And then as far as management goes, folks like Chris's shop would be analyzing how finances are and how many supervisors versus how many people. And that's something that myself and a few of our programmatic people who have been in the provider network, they can monitor that. So, but as we build the process to actually look at this pressure testing, that would be something Kevin could do, and reporting back to you.
You know, and it almost is you know, you like the fact, that Chris, that, there was a vote by the providers for number 2, but it almost tells me, well, wait a minute, maybe their priorities are wrong in thinking of how to approach this with the best model, which would be number 3 perhaps. And how come? I mean, how come you got to, so I'm sort of thinking of it a little bit differently, and it just raises more issues in my mind, that sometimes you can live in a world and doing a good job with what you've got, and the providers do a good job with what they've got, but if there's too much slippage, then you're gonna have problems getting to the essential mission of what we're supposed to be here for.
Yeah, so
anyway, I don't mean to pull us off subject a whole bunch, but, and I know you want to take us down the road of the, what do you want, a 3,
No.
are you needing a vote on
I wasn't done yet. I've got other aspects to option 2 that I want to explain.
What are you?
Because there was a lot of pieces.
I got it. What are you after? Are you after a vote today on this, or
Right.
this is a presentation?
Yes, because y'all said we had to do it by January 1st.
We're voting on one of these 3 options to do January 1st.
We're at a decision point.
Right, and option 3 is not, I'm thankful to those providers that did not want option 3 because it puts more money into the system for them to be able to use, some of them to use not right. But 3 is not really, I mean, 3, honestly, the more I learn about 3, the more it is just it would be out of the realm of possibility, but I'll talk about that more later. Go ahead.
So the thing is with option 2, what option 2 is, it's a great blend of rip the Band-Aid off and, you know, some of the options in option 3. The beauty with option 2 is we're flipping if you look at a car, we're taking the engine and we're swapping it out from a capitated engine to a fee-for-service engine. So the whole inner workings of fee-for-service are at play, and they're going to be implemented, okay? But the gap funding, we're going to hold where we are right now for 6 months, just so that we can start addressing these 7 boards. Isn't it only 7 that have this negative gap that's going to be impacted detrimentally, that can't afford it because their cash isn't there, right? I mean, it's a small, it's only 6 or 7 providers that are detrimentally impacted by this that can't afford it, if you will.
Chris, this is Stephanie, in Florence, and I'm just looking down at attachment C, and of those 7, 3 of them are my counties. Florence, Darlington, Georgetown are in those negative numbers. And then Horry, Marlboro, and Dillon are my others. And, you know, the only one that's, looks strong enough, basically, by my assessment, is really Horry. And maybe Marion and Dillon would be okay, but, you know, like the Charleston board and the Thrive Upstate board appear to be pretty strong, as well as Trident of Aiken. Is there a way that those boards, those 7 boards that are struggling, could they look into how those other boards are doing it and doing it well, and perhaps use them as a model for the way to adjust their system of doing this to bring themselves in a better perspective, or are these gap funds necessary in order to carry them to that point?
All right, so attachment C is really not a very good one to look at. It's pertinent, but it's not the one to focus on, because you talk about I really didn't want to get into talking about specific providers, but since we're there, Florence is losing $780,000 right now. They're the one that's having to put 21.7% of their money from other services
Right,
into Band Bs and Is.
correct.
They will get an extra $1 million flipping to B&I, fee for service. So you're looking at it from a standpoint of where they are right now, not how they're impacted with this change and where they are right now. So you really need to look at attachment D.
All right.
And compare the increase, decrease gap column or the option 2 funding total to the cash position on the far right. And with that comparison, you will see a lot of these boards, the reason they are doing poorly is because they're the ones losing under B&I.
Right,
So
okay.
their actual financial problems are going to be cured or remedied at a great deal due to this flip. So, and back to the option 2, I do understand where you're coming from, Commissioner Thomas. What's imperative and what kind of to visualize this is allows us to start putting in play all of our fee-for-service structures and start practicing that and getting providers up to speed and getting us up to speed.
Getting bills paid and doing
Yeah,
all.
so there's a lot of infrastructure that we have to put in place. These providers that during this 6-month period, we're like, okay, we're going to hold you harmless. We're going to pay a gap grant, if you will. We need to get in there. We need to look at your people that you're serving, make sure we're not improperly funding you. So for example, if you understand the I know you don't, I'm saying that if you understood the capitated funding system, people are not always funded at the proper level based on the needs of that consumer. So they may be funded at a G and they need an H, and that's $20,000 difference between those two bands. We have a lot of that. The problem is we've been able to get lazy and ignore those funding issues because we knew we had all this cash sitting out there in B's and I's. It covered up a lot of weakness in our ability to monitor and fund properly. So a key component of this is during the 6-month period, we need to really look at who you're serving, and is there a true gap that is from your inefficiency, or is it because we're funding you poorly in these other bands that are still capitated? Secondarily, what do your operations look like? If you're making all this money off of these bands, but you're still losing money as an agency, that points to potential operational inefficiency, which is where my team gets involved, and we start analyzing their operations, and we start telling them, okay, you've got 6 maintenance people for 5 houses. You don't need that. You should only have 1. I'm exaggerating. Your workers' comp is 3 times what you should look at, safety program. We bring all that to bear, looking at everything. I mean, their food purchases, their utilities, their
Which would
telephone.
be an indication they are overstaffed or whatever. and
Look at staffing,
all kinds of stuff
look at everything.
Yeah, now, why?
Operational inefficiency has been going on for a very long time, and we should have been talking about operational inefficiency since June, whenever we talked about going to this to begin with. So the operational inefficiencies should have already been decided by now.
Well, we are working on that, but
This is November, and we've been talking about going to fee-for-service since June.
well, it's a provider, it's their responsibility to be
I understand,
operationally
and they need
efficient.
to be getting their
We
financial
are,
houses.
we're just a tool to help them get there. If they can't.
I'm not trying to blame you, I'm just trying to tell you, they should have known since June we were doing this.
Correct.
And they should have understood that we needed to get to the operational inefficiency points.
And I think a lot of them are making those adjustments.
Well, they are, but I don't know if they're doing it fast enough, but I hope they are. Because December 31st, we're doing a different system, I think. But if you're done with option 2, I want to talk about option 1. So, I mean.
Well, Commissioner Thomas was gonna say something. Did you? Go back.
I forgot what it was.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. I told you I'm too old to go to jail. I'm too old to remember.
Well, a lot of the items in option number 3 are some of the things we are going to look at. We do have to look at the ICF rate. But that is a discussion with HHS to make sure we are reimbursed for that, that the rate is the rate. In other words, if they need more money in ICFs, which is not a waiver program, that we talk to HHS based on the cost of that program and they raise the rate the way it's supposed to be. That's a whole different discussion.
Mary, what's to compel those that would find it disadvantageous, whether they're the 7 or somebody else that might say, you know, heck, I like this, the band system because I got monies that are going out and I really like where those monies are going and y'all are gonna make me work harder to make my money and I don't like that, or to make our money. Now, I don't really think that that would be a motive on the part of good providers because they're in it to help people. But I'm just saying there's that little cloud in my mind. And so what is built into 2, into item 2, that is really the incentive, if they've got 6 months to keep on doing what they're doing, you know, are they just gonna kick the can down the road a little further?
Go ahead. All right.
Let me give you a perspective. And the best way I can describe where we are and the frustration among all of us is, and I hear it in your question, I hear it in Alfred's question, is give me what normal looks like. Tell me what the standard is from which then you can measure me to tell me whether I'm efficient or not. That, to me, that's the number one business question that we're all getting at. And the answer to that question is DDSN has failed to set that standard because we've lived in this capitated world where we've never actually done business the way it should be done. The way it should be done, back to the capitated question, is instead of paying 100 people individual fee for service where you're going to kind of get a bell curve, we just decided to pay you $10,000 for each person, and you figure it out. Well, to come up to a capitated number, you actually have to have math, costs, and projections involved to come up with an honest number of which I can hold the provider accountable. We have not ever done that. We've just kind of incrementally thrown legislative appropriations into a bucket and we hand it out. And then when a provider says, hey, my ICF rate's too low, we say, hey, it's in the band. Your at-home bands are high and they cover the low ones. Yeah. Okay, we'll keep on working for a while. Well, when you do that for so long, nobody knows what normal looks like. And I really believe if you went to 50 providers doing residential services, they do it a number of ways and they all think they're the best. And guess what? There are some efficiencies to be had out there. So when we move forward, we're changing this system at a time. We're changing at a time when there's a disadvantage. Because if we had some, and this is the way the rest of the country does it, you get some expert in here, and they come in and they do a market rate analysis, and it's a good one. You will hear Mercer talk about, Mercer did a bad one. If Mercer did a good market rate study, we wouldn't be having this problem today because they would have described what normal looks like. They came in our opinion, they gave us a pretty good assessment of the residential world. We're somewhere between 12 and 20% under where we should be. I believe that's a decent analysis. They didn't do good analysis on the actual. So we're in a position where if we just had market rates, we would answer everybody's questions. Here are the rates. If you want to be a service provider, come in, go do it. We're done talking. Okay, we don't have that. We have to, our problem is we still got this bucket of money that we've never really calibrated to know whether what's fair or not. So our whole model is driven on the model of until we get market rates, we can do no harm. Meaning we got to keep you where you're at. And I tell you, I'd be the first one to think, if I thought the providers were sticking money in their pocket and being overpaid, I can tell you right now, I would be saying, hey, whoa, baby, we need to do something different. I don't think that's the case. Because when we look, a lot of times we talk about the cash in the system. There's $64 million out there. Well, the devil's always in the details. 30 million of that 64 million is a payback from 2013 and 14 where DDSN made a rate error for many, many years. So a lot of providers took that windfall and put it in the bank. And so really, they have 34 million out there. What's 34 million? Chris will give him 2 minutes. He'll say that's 5 weeks of cash flow or 6 weeks of cash flow. All I'm saying is, hey, I think we have a healthy system cash flow wise. I don't think they're all out there rolling in the dough. I think some are better managers than others. So when I look at our system is, we have got to flip this switch to go to fee for service without doing any harm. And when we're flying a plane, literally, with no gauges as to what normal looks like, we just got to maintain normal until we can get a rate study in here, or Director Baker commits to market rates. And I believe he will raise our residential rates based on cost, based on the Mercer report. So the time to look at the model and say, you know what, I think they're making too much money out there. I want to do this. That's a bad model because we have no evidence to that.
Mhm.
The time to say Model 3, I'm the first believer. When you look at the gap issue, we've been patting ourselves on the back about this capitated model. We're doing this and we're managed care. That is evidence of how bad we were. Because when we can have a board, literally, we give them this amount of money for at-home services, and they're no more than an administrator. And they have to go over and reach into the residential side and bring $700,000 to cover our poor math. That's a failure. And then we have other boards that are swimming in extra cash. It's kind of a windfall. Now, I wouldn't say it's a windfall as in, an egregious windfall. They might be the ones with that cash who can fill some gaps over here. So if we start getting into an analysis of what normal looks like, I think it's a mistake. We don't know what normal looks like. I will say what normal looks like is, with the money that we have in the system, providers are providing services. There are some on the low end of fiscal health. And when we flip this switch on B's and I's, we got to do it, in my opinion. We can't cause any harm, but what we do is we create the stress on the system that, hey, we're going to let you keep that gap for 6 months. But during that 6 months, you got to go through Chris Clark school of are you efficient or not? And that will be the first time that we will comb through these boards to really see, are you an anomaly? You can't paint with a broad brush. Every board has a different portfolio of residents they serve. Some out there have people with very high acuities, and I believe they're understaffed, and they need a good part of that gap. You may find other boards that have been sophisticated for 20 years, and they've been very good at building a residential portfolio of very low acuity people, and they're properly staffed. We just don't have the bandwidth in this building to make those determinations, nor should we. We couldn't afford to staff it. The way organizations do it across the country is they go hire an expert, they come in, they do a cost study, and they figure out how many supervisors you need, how many.
Well, what, we got adjoining states.
Right.
It's not like we're an island somewhere.
Yes.
There are adjoining states that are doing it by way of fee for service.
Yes.
That are regionally located, like.
Yes.
Georgia. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Okay, Alabama, Mississippi, North Carolina.
Right.
Okay, those are, why can't you use those as your models for what the rate should be, payment system, or whatever the numbers ought to be at? And why do you need to bring in experts to tell you what you can find next
The
door?
Mercer report did just that, and they compared us to other states.
Yeah.
And they made a determination on the residential side that we are 12 to 20% below market conditions. Because when they define market's a combination of not only your cost structure, but market is a combination of market. What's the market bear? And they will look in the southeastern states. So the answer is, it is,
We already have.
we have that report
HHS already.
that says residential deserves a rate increase.
Yeah.
And so what we're doing here is when we're starting with the at-home bans and we see this extra cash in there, we've got to be very careful in what we think we should do with it, because we know on January 1st, if we extract $10 million and say, well, this is a windfall profit, what we're saying is, we found your bands that had surpluses, but we're leaving your bands that have deficits. So we really got to be in a position to leave the cash in the system so we don't destabilize it, while we have 6 months to examine, hey, who really needs that gap, who really doesn't need that gap, And at that point in time, hopefully that analysis matches up with Director Baker's market rate analysis and we get new rates. Because once we get new rates, all this is mute. A rate is a rate. And we've all seen the positive impact of waiver case management rate on the efficiency of waiver case management. It forced providers to be efficient and effective, and it hurt because the ban system created conditions not to be efficient and effective. I think some of those same tendencies may be in the current system, but what we have to do is before we destabilize it with assumptions as to what's fair and unfair with the rate, we've got to actually create a yardstick as to what normal looks like. And so we're really waiting for HHS to formalize a residential rate, which will be the start of what's fair and what's not fair. But in the interim, and I think Mary and Chris have more experience than most anybody in the state, we're going to be able to look at those 50 providers during that 6-month period. And we will be able to tease out those that, hey, you've been getting a windfall profit, and that come June 30th, DDSN is not going to recommend the commission to maintain that gap. We may find people out there that we may need to add money to. But we got to.
We may need to find new providers.
When
We're talking about the boards right now.
yes.
I'm talking about providers though, that can't meet the numbers or whatever they say they can.
Once you set market rates, that's the whole idea of market rates.
You will open.
Some people may never be able to organize themselves to be profitable, and they may elect to do something else. And you may find other people from other states come in that can hit that.
We're seeing that in case management. You know, you've got boards right now wanting to get out of it, even though it's coming conflict free in a couple of years, they're gonna have to all get out of it pretty much, but, you know,
And this
we're
is
seeing
Yeah,
some
this is their
boards that
way
are.
of right-siding that,
Yeah.
that expense. So I'm having to support case management because they're not getting on the production bandwagon. So we're going to conflict free, so I'm gonna let them go now, and we're gonna concentrate on this part of our business, which is what we expected. That's exactly what we anticipated, that slowly they would retreat out of the business and the private providers would move in to get us to that conflict-free moment. That's exactly what the plan was, and that is happening. What we need to do, I would say that if everything was fair and even keeled and all the bands were the same everywhere, but that is not the way it happens. When somebody gets, when new bands go out, and this happened, I guess really like in 2008 and again in 2000, we got all these bands into the system. So it was based on the number you were on the waiting list. Not that we gave one to Aiken, one to Buford, then we went through the alphabet, and then we started all back again and gave 1, 1, 1. It was wherever that individual lived. So you might have someplace get 50 bands all at once, and maybe 3/4 of those were kids, and they were only using this much of their money. For the audience, I'm saying a very small amount of their money, right? And then you might get another county, and maybe this is what happened in Florence, you get a higher number of people who aren't children. And they're going to use more expensive services because they're not covered by state plan. So there's not a lot of money floating around those band Bs and Is that were taken back. So there's no fairness in the way that bands went out. I mean, it was fair if you're on the waiting list because that's what it is. Your number comes up, you get a waiver slot. So we have to look at each person, each board where they are. And we are talking about the boards because they're the financial managers. And that's who's involved in this capitated system. So when we go in to analyze, what our job is going to be is to make sure that the folks they have, especially in their residential and their day services, are correctly assessed at whether they're higher acuity or not. So if they are a band G, because historically they were a band G and DDSN didn't do anything about moving people up and down in bands, but they've gotten older. It's been 20 years, and now they need more services. We need to make sure we understand that that person needs more help. You know, I was looking at ICF where I've got a whole bunch of individuals that moved in that are more elderly. We got people losing their sight. Well, care needs change when that happens. And if we just never change the band for that person, we might not be funding that accurately. So as we move out of the band, the at-home services, the respite, the PCA, back those kind of services, and start looking at having to change the residential rates to fee-for-service, we darn well better make sure that those folks that are out there receiving those services are getting the funding they require. So the idea of funding a location, that's the way bands used to be handed out back in the day. We need to wrap those services around the person. And we need to make sure that as we're looking at this gap money, does some of this gap money stop being a grant and start being funding that person to the level that they need that service? And then we look at management inefficiencies. Of course, we're going to look at that. People, you know, when I came into York, they were just taking every dollar that came in and just divvying it up so that there was a zero balance. When I came in, it was like, no, we're going to look at the funding for this program and this program, and we're going to live on the revenue for the program, and we're going to hold back. If I need to move money over there, I will, but I want people to understand their budget of what they have to do. So everybody has a different way of managing. We're going to check that. We're going to check the staffing levels. We're going to check the number of maintenance people. We're going to, you know, those are the things that we're looking at.
Didn't you do a little bit of that when you're doing the case management switch?
We did try to, yeah. And we had some folks that were really on board with doing that, you know, on telling them to understand what their overhead actually is and what they actually needed. And, you know, and some folks, the people that did that, they got it and they moved down that road. But we're going to be doing the same thing. It's going to the same analysis. Actually, we've done the same thing for the boards that required our financial help just to stay solvent. And we've done that for 4 separate boards. So, and a lot of it was, even though we had one board who said, I've got all these band changes, you're not funding me right. When we looked through all those people, we're saying, no, these people are funded correctly. Let's look at your management. And that's where we found the savings. So it is a combination of all those things. But to rip out the gap that they're living on now without doing that work, it will destabilize our system.
One
All
more
right,
analogy. Go ahead.
That's me.
I'm gonna recognize Commissioner Miller.
Just one more analogy to help Mike put some perspective on this.
Okay.
The waiver system is about $400 million. So we're talking about this $10 million gap. So what we're proposing is maintain stability of the system, give us 6 months where everybody sees there is a deadline, and we can refine that so we can minimize damage and fine tune it. And I want to compare that to waiver case management. When we started waiver case management, board's productivity was about 34% of what we were paying them. And in those early months after we said we were going to do it, I'm telling you, boards in good faith were trying to be efficient, and they would say, I can never get above 50%. I can never get above 56%. Then they started developing themselves. Then they started looking at their overhead. Then they started looking at efficiency of personnel. And right now, I know we hate to do it. I know Mary hates to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. When you take the revenue that they have now, this month, May of this year, and compare it to the prior band payment, they're right around 90% when you throw in target case management. So they never thought they'd give up 50%. They matured on this glide plane of feeling the pressure, but not having the rug pulled out from under. And when we finally got to that point where there was a deadline, it did this. So I think we're trying to use that same model to, I think, a lesser problem. We're only talking about 10 million out of 400 million. Maintain stability, put the stress of evaluation on them. And then put it this way, this 6 months of stress of evaluation, I think, is going to force that reflection for improvement. But at the end of the day, everybody knows one thing. Sooner or later, HHS is going to give some market rate. And when that market rate happens, the rate's the rate. And then there's going to be no more discussion. Here's the rate, go do it. If you can't do it, next. So I think what we're really looking for is that safety net of transition with a hard deadline of June 30th, so that there are no windfall profits out there, as well as there's nobody out there getting hurt. I think there's a lot of providers being hurt now because maybe they weren't the best business people. And a good example is some of these boards that are running these negative deficits in B's and I's. Chris looks at them and says, well, they're running deficits because they didn't ask for outliers. So we can't assume everybody's the perfect manager out there. So our goal is to find stability and then have a deadline, which encourages people to participate in reflection. And then at some point, decisions will be made. Some people will recommend gaps be cut or reduced, or heck, they might even be added. But at some point, the system only has finite money. And we're really waiting for the one thing. We're waiting for market rates to kick in. Market rates kick in is what it is. And hopefully people have learned on the safety net window, just like we learned in waiver case management. Those people who said they couldn't get above 50% are at 90% now. Heck, they're at 102% now. I think with the pressure of starting, people will improve their game. And I think this is a lower lift than waiver case management. I thought waiver case management was phenomenal success by the providers.
You just gotta make sure that the safety net, it's real, is it real? Is it a safety net or is it a real need? That's what we gotta go to.
If I may,
Hang on, guys. Commissioner Miller's been waiting patiently for like 15 minutes.
sorry.
I'm gonna recognize him, then I'm gonna recognize Commissioner Malfris, then I'm gonna recognize Commissioner Rollinson. Because we're talking over each other. So, Commissioner Miller, you're recognized.
I see exactly where you're going. I agree with it, okay? I have no disagreement, okay? Because it sounds logical and it makes sense. There is a yardstick. Chris have the yardstick, okay? My only recommendation is every month, even if it takes a special meeting, the commission is briefed on that yardstick so that we will be able to collaborate and make sure that when we get to the end of that 6 month, we have the tool and die that we need to move forward. I'm in 100% of what was said up there, so I'm in agreement with it. So I rest my case. I give back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Commissioner Malfris.
Thank you. What I'm trying to say is that I think, I don't think option 2 is out of the realm of possibility, obviously, but I do think that option 1 is a better option in a lot of ways, and there are some providers that agree with me, amazingly. So I don't disagree with all of y'all out there, whoever you are, unlike what some people around here seem to think, but I do not disagree with a lot of them. But the thing with option 1 is, number one, all this talk about operational inefficiency, and we need to talk about what their operational inefficiency is and all that sort of thing, that has been supposed to have been going on since June. They knew we were doing this since June, and obviously they haven't done much about it since June. And so they're not going to do anything about it until we push the issue for them to do anything about it. And the way we push the issue to do anything about it is option 1. Because option 1 gives everybody the incentive to do all they can to get people into the system and to get paid for the services that they provide. And it gives them, and it does not destabilize. It actually bothers me that y'all use the word destabilize for option 1, because it does not destabilize anybody by giving them a loan. You don't destabilize any organization by saying, I'll give you a loan for what you need. What it does is decide how much money each person needs individually, because it depends on how much loan they had to get. And once they get a loan, then we decide what they need to pay back and all that sort of thing down the road. But true fee for service, or the closest thing to these 3 options, is obviously option 1, because it gives you fee for service, and then it says, okay, if you can't make it, get a loan from us, and this is how much money you need, and it individualizes every person to see what loan they need, and then we decide who had to get a loan and how much they needed, and all that sort of thing at that time. And that's what the 6 months is for, is to give them the time to decide how much loan they need, and then we can evaluate their loans at the end of this 6-month period. But all you're doing, with all due respect, is kicking the can down the road another 6 months by using option 2. Now, option 3 is worse than that. So, I mean, if we want to talk about that, we can talk about it later. But option 2 is really, in my opinion, kicking the can down the road another 6 months, which we've done since June of this past year. And case management is a great study for how fee-for-service works if we would allow it to. And I understand they need loans, and I'm not ripping off any Band-Aids, and I'm not doing anything negative by giving people loans. All that's doing is saying, you got to pay it back, which is what the reality is of the world. And I think some of these agencies need to realize what the realities of the world is when it comes to this stuff. But some of them are doing a great job. And York County is one of them. They have one of the I think they have one of the largest, fund reserves in the state. And so obviously they can live with any one of these options, but any of them can live with any of them because we are giving them a loan. And that is the closest to fee for service, if that's where we truly want to go. And as far as I know, that's where we wanted to go since June, and that's where we're trying to get as of January 1st of next year.
Thank you, Commissioner Mountford. Commissioner Rollins.
Yes. Chris, I'm going to go back on something you said about how you don't want to address individual counties. Unfortunately, we represent individual counties. And, while, y'all represent the whole state, as commissioners, it is our job to look out for our counties that we are elected to serve. Mine are Florence, Darlington, Georgetown, Horry, Marlboro, Marion, and Dillon. As I reviewed these counties that I'm responsible for, any of these options will be okay for my counties, to be honest with you. 1, 2, or 3 will be pretty much okay. There are only 2 counties that I am concerned about. One county with option 1, obviously would be Marlboro. All right, so clarify for me, in the increase or decrease revenue from the gap, those counties that show negative in that document that you recommended in attachment D, tell me what that means for those counties. Is that the amount that they're gonna, even after we help them or after they get their funding, that they're gonna come up short? Or what does that exactly mean?
Okay, couple things. First, I wasn't saying you shouldn't look at your counties. I was trying to use some anonymity as far as in the public setting using names. It wasn't that you had an issue with you looking at your providers. So I'm sorry that was misunderstood. I'm just saying we've tried to share this statewide in a very generic fashion so that each provider doesn't know the other provider's specific situations.
Well,
Marlboro.
We are a FOIA through a forum. So this information will be put on our website. So anyone that wants to see this information that I'm looking at will be able to see it on the state website. So it is not something confidential. Anyone who wants to see it can see it, Chris.
Okay. In regards to Marlboro, they are, if you look at attachment B, they have the most cash reserves of any board in the state. If you look at their budget size, they are facing an $8,400 loss under option 1.
Okay.
So let me get back to this. Yeah, right now they're profiting, if you will, $34,000, but with the split rate would profit only $26,000. So they would actually lose about $8,500.
Okay. But there's
under option 1. Okay. Under option 2, we would actually fund that $8,400 for 6 months, which would actually only be $4,200 because this is an annual number.
Okay.
And so we would give them a grant for 6 months for that amount. Okay. The far right column, increase, decrease from gap, is if just splitting fee for service, they don't need a grant to make them whole because they're actually making out even better just splitting rates alone. Okay. They make up the full gap. So those folks, whatever number that is, maybe 10 boards, right? Just splitting service fees, they're going to be fine.
Okay. I just want to make sure none of our boards are going under because of any decision we make.
No, the whole point is, that's the whole plan of why all these plans make sure of that. And then option 1 just does it through a loan and option 2 does it through a grant.
Okay.
And there's a lot of incentive to me for loans instead of grants because, like I say, then it tells people what they actually need and it makes them understand that they're going to have to get better or else they're going to have to pay it back and all this. Okay. I mean, we could even make a decision. Well, nothing. I'm not going there because that gives other people more options, and I don't want to go to another option I could think of. But anyway, go ahead. I'm technically chairman of the board for a moment.
Hey, I want to, I want to do it.
It's already ended, oh, no!
The Malcolm Terry.
Oh, wow.
Stays in the code.
He was enjoying that.
Trust me, you don't want it.
They're taking a trip to Hawaii.
Hey, as long as I'm not responsible for the financial side of that, I'm all in favor of it.
No, it's within your law.
I think it's important in regards to what Mr. Malphur said in regards to option one and the inefficiencies and us not addressing those. The problem I have with that statement is, again, these are B's and I's, which are entitlement programs. If a consumer is funded at $15,000, a person's receiving services, and they have needs of $32,000, the board is required, it's not optional, to authorize the $32,000. They have to pay 17 grand out of their back pocket, and they have no say-so over it.
That's right.
Till they get over 39,000, they're not even eligible for additional funding from us. We've got boards out there that have 15 consumers that are between the outlier threshold that they cannot get up over and the band payment, and they're $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 upside down of no fault of their own. So to look at this gap number and say, well, that's an indicator that a board is doing a poor job and it's an indicator of inefficiency, is not even close to actually what it is. If we were looking at residential and day bands, I would agree 150% with that statement. These are at-home services. Case managers often are not even working for the board that's stuck with the bill. So you've got Thrive Upstate, for example, and Babcock Center. They have all their consumers are case managed by other providers. The case manager authorizes all the service. Babcock gets the bill in the mail and says, you pay it. They don't have any say. That's why they want conflict-free, by the way, because you don't have the control. You know, right now there's a built-in potential incentive to suppress services. So that's what the conflict-free case manager is all about, is, you know, we don't want that conflict. So we need to dig into that concept. And in regards to loaning up agency funds, depending on what the repayment terms are, basically you're asking an agency to do double deep cuts. Because not only do I have to cut, let's look at one of these, it's $700,000. All right, they have to cut services by $700,000 per year, their expenses. So that's a lot of employees fired or wherever they're going to save that money. They have to also cut another $700,000 or some other amount to pay us back. So the loan option, yeah, it's great. It patches a hole, but to dig it, it's like a family that's living on credit card debt. You got to pay back that credit card debt. So you got to right size your budget, not only to continue to not use the credit card anymore, but to pay that credit card back. So that would be my 2 cents on that. I don't know if
let me, not to cut you guys off, because you guys are fonts of information,
Yeah.
but looking at our times, I do want to say something.
Okay.
At this point, does anybody need any additional information for purposes of moving forward on a vote? Because that's what we're dealing with here. Right now, we have to decide which of these three options we're going to tell staff to move forward with. Okay. Does anybody else need any additional information for purposes of us making that vote? All right. Not to cut you guys off, but just trying to keep things moving forward. Okay. All right. So with the Q&A ended, so we now entertain a motion with regard to the plan.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept option one.
Do we have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion with regard to that?
Well, let me, just by way of discussion, since we got a motion on the floor.
Yep.
You know, what's making sense to me about what Barry is saying, if we decide not to do it, I don't, what's troubling me is that you've got 6 months of continued monies coming in under what I'm seeing as a flawed system, or we wouldn't be changing it. I could see a gradation down, so month one, they get the same amount, January, same amount, month two, same amount, less 10%, month three, same amount, less 30%. So there's some real incentive there to cooperate. I really, this is like a real hard problem, and I understand the arguments, but I don't think you're giving them enough up. You all have all, I'm listening to you all, I'm impressed. I'm impressed at what you all, you got this big load that you're putting on you to work with them and everything. Well, where's their incentive to really get in there and segue with you and get it done? And only by way of seeing, what do you mean there's a drop next month? Well, let's hurry up then. Let's get this thing implemented before it runs. But every month then is something that's pushing and tightening a little bit more. Kind of, I was going to use a sneaky example. That doesn't sound good. So, but that's why something's just wrong with number two by way of their incentive and the workload's on you all. And I want them coming to you and begging for help. I don't want you to. It just seems like the roles are kind of reversing, and one fits better. And if that doesn't work, then I would move for a modification of two.
Well,
There you go. So that's,
the only way I know to do this is we're gonna have to.
okay, you got a motion, and I spoke to the motion.
Okay. And, and I'll address what my concern is with one versus two. And it somewhat relates to what Chris is. We've spent the last 30 plus years training our people how to deal with things in a certain way. And people that knew how to do it well had some real benefits from that. Again, I'm going to come back to when Mary came into York and we looked at those acuities, and we were on a huge deficit, and she came in there and identified a lot of individuals that we were able to change the bands on. We've been training everybody to do this in a very specific way. For most of the people in our system, this is the only system that they've ever dealt with. And when you talk about, we have been talking about this since June and sporadically even before that. But I don't expect that we've trained people to act somebody one way for 30 years, that in 5 months they're going to change that without us helping them make that change. So the reason why I'm opposed to number one is I don't think it puts enough burden on us to help them with the system that this commission has created for the last 30 years. So that's why I'm opposed to number one. I do believe, based upon what I'm hearing from staff, that they believe they have the assets to be able to untrain those behaviors that have been learned for the past 30 years during that 6 month period of time, but they need that time to do that. So that's why I'm opposed to option number one.
Question for still on the floor, Mr. Chair.
The question is still.
Okay, because, here's how I feel about it. Entire issue. It was set out to different agencies, am I correct? Question,
Yes.
which do you prefer?
Yes.
They came back with number two, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, it is.
Okay, that's what they came back with, correct?
Overwhelmingly, yeah.
That was the majority. And they are the ones, they are the feet on the ground, okay? And in my opinion, I think that we should go with the feet on the ground. Now, I heard the word adjustment when Chris first spoke. You said that over the next 6 months, the word adjustment comes in because there are going to be different variables. Am I correct? Okay, so 1, 2, or 3 may apply. Am I right? There may be some circumstances where one fits the shoe because of that particular circumstance. Am I correct?
But they don't have an option.
We would choose 1, 2, or 3 for all providers.
Okay, so then my question is then to you all, how does number 2 fit into, because we have to get feedback from you guys as well. How does number 2 fit into the mold? Because that was the majority.
The difference between 1 and 2 is fundamental fairness.
Okay.
Because number 1 if we had market rates start today, I would be for number one. Okay, we do not have market rates today. Matter of fact, we have evidence to the contrary. We have evidence that residential rates are artificially low. Okay, so for us to extract $10 million out of the at-home vans and say, hey, you guys go get loans. Oh, and by the way, we haven't taken time to fix the rates yet, is fundamentally unfair to me. That's how I see the difference.
Evidence is essential.
We have a Mercer report as well as cost studies. Chris just finished a 17 cost study. The providers spent $48 million on costs for ICFs and generated what? 40 million in billings.
I don't remember the numbers like.
The bottom line is they're paying, where does that $8 million come from? It's coming from the at-home vans being recirculated. So I don't think there's much cushion in the system. So the premise that 10 million is somehow a windfall is not a good premise. When you look at and again, we live this every day. I don't know how, standing in your shoes, it's very difficult to process this. I feel like that one is basically saying, hey, we're starting fee for service. We're taking the surpluses, we're leaving you the deficits, and here's a loan for the difference.
Stephanie, hey, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure. Stephanie, are you back?
I am back.
Okay, sorry.
Another thing that I believe in evidence, okay? Because you can't fall off the cliff. Because if this thing goes opposite than what the evidence show, it's gonna come back to haunt us. So I recommend we go with the evidence.
Can I say one other thing? When you're looking at these grants, some of them will stay as true revenue because we've also got, as you want to talk evidence, we've got a stack of outlier requests that go back years that we have not funded because we didn't have the money or we just didn't have the process to look at them. So we need to look at what individuals need to be supported.
And not only that, Director Baker just was on, what were we talking about? Evidence, because we had to backtrack and go backwards, correct? Okay, so I stand where I stand, if I stand alone.
If you went with boots on the ground all the time, we wouldn't be at fee for service for case management right now. Because if any of y'all wanted to go back to whenever we were talking about that, a lot of these providers were saying the roof's gonna fall in, everything's gonna go to nothing, we're gonna die if we go to case management, if case management goes to fee for service. Well, when case management went fee for service, everything went wonderful comparatively speaking. It wasn't perfect, nothing's ever gonna be perfect, but it went very well. And there was many providers, I'm not gonna say who, one of them comes to mind, that said, oh, the sky is, she literally stood in this room, I wasn't on the board at the time, I watched the meetings, but she literally stood in this room and said, if you go to case management fee for service, the sky is going to fall. And she was not joking. And the sky is still, it's a beautiful sky out there today, and it has been for a year. And so, and I'm not suggesting any of these people need to get a loan of any kind, and if they do, they do. And we can talk about the loans at that time and how much money they have to pay back and when they have to pay it back and all that. But that can be a discussion for another day if we went with option one. But to say that we're just gonna go with the boots on the ground, we would never have changed anything because state agencies don't change unless they're pushed to change.
All right, we're gonna call this one vote. So there's a motion and a second with regard to option one. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Nay.
I haven't called for nays yet. So ayes, I've got at this point in time, Commissioner Blackwood.
Yep.
Malphris and Thomas.
Yep.
Any opposed?
Rollinson is aye.
Okay.
Robinson is aye, that's 4.
Okay.
Yes.
Number one?
Yep.
All right. So opposed, Commissioner Miller? Myself, nay. Any abstentions? I don't believe there's any abstentions. So the vote is for option one.
That's right, and by individual member, I would ask that was recorded in the minutes, how we just voted.
That's why.
It's 4-2 for option one.
That's why I called it that way, Commissioner Malphris.
Thank you.
That's very clear on the record. Okay, all right. Okay, moving on, cost reports update.
All right.
Well, since this is a hot topic, I feel like we need to keep the commission up to date on our progress or lack thereof. And so I think I'm going to keep this on the agenda for a while just to ensure that you have a comfort level. We just filed the 2017 report on 11/4. I haven't heard back from HHS at this point in regards to any questions or even acknowledgement of receipt, but I did validate that it went. It's not in my outbox. It was in my sent. There is no anticipated payback from that filing based on our preliminary review. Keep in mind that Myers and Stauffer is a CPA firm in Maryland that is experts in this industry and are engaged by HHS to complete 17's cost report as well as 13 through 15. We have been meeting with them weekly. We have a team here that meets through WebEx every Monday morning, and we are moving really fast on 13 and 14 at this time. We have not started on 15, but we have 13 and 14 in the works with lots of data and questions going back and forth. We are on our own in regards to 18 and forward. HHS obviously is going to continue to pay for us to do our cost reports. We have, Pat and I and Mary have met and tried to look at, we got a preliminary quote from Myers and Stauffer to do our annual cost report for us. It's about $65,000 a year is what they quoted us. The problem is you don't build your internal knowledge and your ability and skills to know these rules if you outsource this type of thing. So we all agreed that we need to develop this knowledge and capability internal to our organization. So we do have a team involved right now working on 18, but we also have a position that has been posted and closed, I think, last week, and we're in the process of interviewing for a full-time cost reports person. And I have a ton of experience doing the provider cost reports, but virtually none at the state level. The one thing I have is since I've been here. So it's very important to me as we build our capability to identify resources to ensure that we can fulfill those reports and do them properly. So we have engaged Chris Lagord, who worked here for I think 13 years and filed our agency's cost report, and he is consulting with us. He's on these Monday calls as well, and he is leading our team, and he is going to help me train this new person once they're hired. So we are very close to building out our own ability to get this work done. If we can get somebody hired here in the next month, I would assume by the end of this fiscal year, we could have 18 done and then 19 really quickly behind it. The reason is we've got to train ourselves. We got to learn, like, how do we do this? Where does all this data come from? How does the cost allocations work? So usually the first year takes longer as you learn it, and then you accelerate, each year after that as you build your knowledge. So I just want to update you on the cost reports. I do think there's a lot of positive momentum. It's just a huge lift that we've inherited, along with all the other things we're trying to get done. So hopefully if y'all have questions, I'll be glad to take those, but I just wanted you to know kind of where we were.
Thank you for that, Vic Chris. Any questions with regard to the cost reports? Okay. Next item on the agenda is the legislative update.
Hello, everyone. I'll make this very quick. Update on the regulations. I have good news and bad news about that. Unfortunately, we have to begin the process over again because the drafting notice was last submitted February 22nd, 2019. So it's been over a calendar year. So we have to redo that. But I do believe that I can get those drafting notices submitted by December 11th because all we kind of just have to do is polish them up and put a new date on them and make sure they're right, and then push them to the legislative council. And then the good news is that we're going into a new 2-year session. So if during this process, during the 2021 legislative session, if they don't get pushed through this year, then they can be brought up again for 2022. So we have 2 years to get these pushed through. Hopefully there are no hiccups and we can get them through this session. So that's my goal.
So you're gonna need a legislative committee meeting so they can get acquainted with those regulations, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So David, there you are. That's your committee.
Finally have to have a meeting, okay? Who's on my committee anyway? Could you send me a note and tell everybody?
I think it's Stephanie and Ed, but we'll.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
Stephanie and Ed are the two.
But I'm not a slave driver like.
Excuse me, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess.
Sort of on that note, do you think that, for example, by January, you would have something to put in front of the committee?
Let me think, my social calendar's kind of, yeah, I think we can work that out.
Why don't we plan on that?
Yeah, my goal is to get the drafting notice
Right.
in by December 11th, so that way, the drafting notice goes into the December, register, and then she was asking, either January or February, because the second part of the process is much lengthier. So she was asking if I thought that we could get it in by January or February.
Well, it's gonna need to be approved if you could get it into the December commission meeting from your committee to the December commission meeting, so y'all can approve the language so that it can go.
Do we need to have the
Because
committee?
just the drafting notice is just a notice that we intend to
Right.
set forth regulations.
She'll call me, we'll get a time and
Okay.
shoot it out to the members prior to, we'll do a Skype thing like.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think with the drafting notices, those are just very generic, and they just go in there to say, hey, we're doing these things, if you have public comment, you have 30 days.
And we were down that road last time, but the problem was, we didn't have a quorum of the full commission, so even though the legislative committee approved it,
Right.
the public was upset that we didn't have a quorum of the regular commission. Well, we have that now, so we're gonna move through that process.
Excellent, we're gonna get this.
I'd like to
we're gonna
schedule
Your
push
court,
through.
David,
So one other little thing, the House, they're gonna have an organizational session, December 1st through 2nd, and Senator Hutto has replaced Nikki Setzler as the Senate Minority Leader. And pending any questions, that concludes our report.
Okay. Any questions regarding the legislative update? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda with the man with the most unique sports code in the room, Mr. Jacoby.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Again, being respectful of your time, since you're on a marathon session here, I just had a couple things I wanted to mention. First thing, I wanted to follow up on Commissioner Rollinson's request from last month, talking about standard 1300, the QA standard for internal audit, about how we have to have an external assessment, and Commissioner Rollinson, you asked for cost for that. I did reach out to the Institute of Internal Auditors. If you will remember, we are not due for our peer review until October of 2022, so we have some time. Their quotes are only valid for a 12-month period, so realize when we get into actually doing this, the cost may change. But as we sit here today, for the external assessment, it was $27,600 for the IA come in. Now, just for information purposes, and I think the Finance Audit Committee was sort of clear when we met last time, I did get, there's also the option of doing a self-assessment. They send in an external validator. That cost was $14,800, just for information. Second thing I wanted to mention, and again, I might just cut this to, we completed our audit of the Specialized Family Home Program. We issued that. Y'all received that full audit report last week. And again, just in the interest of time, I'll take if you had any questions or concerns from that report, rather than stepping through that report. It included the report as well as management's response was attached. So were there any questions or concerns?
I don't have any. If we do have questions about something else, are you finished with?
That's it for me.
That thing, I don't know if you were listening. Chairman, may I ask you a question? Yeah. Did, I don't know if you were in the room or listening, but we just went through the band's transition issue.
I heard.
All the capitated nuances and which one to go to, and it was readily apparent that there was going to have to be a lot of interplay between what they know and they can look at and where you fit into that segue working with them. So is that real clear that that's apparently significant marching orders? And I think, I can't imagine anybody disagreeing with this, but I mean, we've got to focus on that.
I think Mary specifically said he could monitor our processes.
Yes.
The process.
But the actual monitoring somebody's acuity level, that's not Kevin's wheelhouse. But he could monitor the process we're going and making sure we're making progress.
Right, and I think that's even taking it down to a level that's down the road from that, from where we are now. So yes, I have been in, I think, most of the BNI meetings that have taken place. So I have sort of been, again, we're just there to observe. We're not part of management. We're not inputting our, so we are definitely looking at that process and following it through even as we speak.
So the target, I presume, would be the ones that would be having problems, and to help determine wherein lies the financial issues that would be perhaps a stumbling block to them that they themselves could be not familiar with, and it could be the outliers, as who knows. But I think what we're going to be looking for at the December meeting is just, okay, exactly where are we at this point? We're about ready to step into this world now, and so so everything I think that Mary said and Pat said and Chris said, and then kind of you segueing in, is what we're expecting to have. Well, let's go back to how you kind of worded it. We need to have month by month know exactly where we are. Just, thank you.
They'll also
Right.
be getting that from us.
Right.
Right, and we'll be monitoring that as well. As those reports come out, we'll be monitoring and we'll be following up as well. And, I think we work pretty well with finance in terms of, because in the past, we've sort of done some of the same thing that finance has done the last couple times in terms of looking at boards and looking at operations and economic and efficiencies of their operations. And the same thing, are you overstaffed here? How there's been, what's the issue? I mean.
Well, just expect bevies of questions to begin emerging.
Oh, I can hardly wait. That'll give me something to look forward to in the new year.
All right, thank you.
Absolutely. So with that, and again, unless there's any questions or comments, that's the report.
We'll see you next month.
All right.
Thanks, Kevin.
Everybody have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
All right, next, if we get our quarterly A&E report and on. And that is tab 12 that we are on now.
Good afternoon. In your tab 12, I have a 2-page handout there for you to represent the quarterly abuse, neglect, and exploitation reports for our system. There are 3 charts. May I take this down?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There are 3 charts there on the first page for you. If you would humor me for a moment, and let's start in the middle of the page because it's easier to explain the day program. Our numbers for day programs are very stable from year to year. We typically know what to expect within the day program systems. I would call your attention to the fact that most day programs were closed for the 4th quarter of fiscal year 20, and many were slow to reopen, or they're operating on a very limited schedule for the fiscal year 21. So that report, actually, that graph shows a pretty steep decline, but it's due to the programs being closed. For the regional centers, the chart shows a really atypical year for fiscal year 20. We had an unusually high number of reports that year, but the number of substantiated cases was in line with our typical reporting on a 5-year cycle. When we look at the community residential setting, the numbers are down for this fiscal year. Again, I do believe that fiscal year 20 was an atypical year for us in terms of the number of reports, but we are down for fiscal year 21. When I look at a month-by-month comparison, we ended the calendar year 2019 on an upward trend, and we continued into the first few months of calendar year 2020. And then when COVID hit, things did come down quite a bit. But we also had people who were staying at home. I think it's important to consider that about 50 to 60% of the abuse and neglect and exploitation allegations are related to injuries of unknown origin. When people were staying home, staff were there with them, they knew how the injuries occurred. We had an increase in critical incidents, but not an increase in the actual abuse allegations. For fiscal year 21, we have had 3 arrests, and those have been reported to you individually as they have occurred. And that's in the regional centers. There has been 1 arrest for, I'm sorry, that's in the community residential setting. There's been 1 in the regional centers. If you flip over, you will see again there has been a general increase in the critical incident reporting. And for the numbers that I have reported here, I have removed the COVID-related critical incident reports. So these numbers have been adjusted for you. We have noticed an increase in law enforcement reports, a slight increase in choking and elopement-related cases, and there has been a significant increase with suicidal threats. Not attempts, but are individuals making a statement that they may wish to harm themselves, which is often an attention-seeking behavior. As more people are staying home for longer periods of time, they're looking for an opportunity to get out, however that may be. And that's one of the areas where we're looking at policy changes to impact how that information is reported and the steps that the providers are taking afterwards. For death reporting, there at the top of the page, you'll see that our death numbers have increased significantly for this fiscal year. If you refer to the table there on the right, you'll see that we have, I have broken out the COVID-related fatalities and then the other suspected causes of death. For both our regional centers and community residential settings, the numbers are much higher than what we would expect based on prior years. But we've had 30 fatalities at this point related to COVID. I'm sorry, 31. We had one this morning. And our numbers are, reflected accordingly here in this table. Any questions?
Next, moving on to the COVID update. Rufus.
Good afternoon. I want to briefly give you some updates regarding covert surveillance data tied to our system. As of 11/17, we have a system-wide total of 631 individuals in our care testing positive for COVID, with 1,044 being staff. The breakout is as follows: 181 reside in our regional centers and 450 in our community-based settings. As Ann talked about, unfortunately we had a death to be reported. I think it was this morning was when the report actually came in. But we have 31 fatalities involving people that we serve that have tested positive for COVID-19. For our staff, the breakout is as follows: 303 members of our workforce at the regional centers and 741 are members of our workforce tied to our community provider network. And unfortunately, again, this is a statistic that will never be good to report. We've had 13 total fatalities of members of our collective workforce that have passed away that tested positive for COVID. From a hazard, or what I like to call hero pay standpoint, I'd like to give the commission an update on where we are in terms of expenditures since we instituted hero pay, because the people that are actually caring for folks who are COVID positive are the ones that are eligible, and they truly are heroes. To date, our expenditures have reached $548,000, and when you add on fringe, it totals $591,000. This has been a worthwhile effort, and I appreciate the support of the commission during last month's meeting. That was a great something great for our staff to hear, that members of the commission were unanimous in the support of that program, and also offering support to our provider network for all their efforts to maintain safety and prevent the spread of this very lethal virus. From an agency standpoint, some of the responses that we've instituted to combat COVID addressed last month to include education webinars that we've hosted in collaboration with DHEC, and some we've hosted ourselves. We publish, I believe to date, 36 situation reports that are available on our website. If you click on the coronavirus banner, you'll find the reports archived, with the most recent report, available first. The goal is to have a situation report out either, well, it probably won't be today, depending on what time we finish, but tomorrow, that will include some guidance relative to the holiday season. We have a lot of inquiries regarding holiday visits and can individuals come home. We have been respectful of those requests and have worked tirelessly to come up with a protocol in place that, while we will discourage that given the community rise in incidence rates of COVID-19, we do recognize the right and the will of individuals to spend time with their families during the holidays, as we do. And during this meeting, CMS actually, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, actually released some guidance specific to nursing homes. Yesterday, I was in communication with Department of Health and Environmental Control. I believe they plan to issue some holiday guidance in addition to what they've already released this week in terms of general guidance for the public. And then later on today, the governor will hold a special briefing to talk about the state's response to COVID-19, as well as precautions that all citizens can take to continue to prevent the spread of COVID-19. That concludes my report. I will receive any questions that you guys may have relative to COVID response efforts or any of the information that I shared.
Has there been any discussion, particularly around those who are going out in the community, who have not been in the community for a while, when they come back in, they're less, are they being isolated? Is there a rapid test that we can give them? I mean, that obviously the big risk is when you let people go out and they come in, it can spread really quickly within the group.
Yeah, to date, with our state-operated intermediate care facilities, we have not extended visits to include off-site overnight visits. In our community training homes, we have, allowed that. And so different settings, but in long-term care settings, what we plan to do with the intent to extend that during the holiday season is to isolate those individuals upon return. I will share, and I don't want to get ahead of the, mayor's report or anything that we haven't formally, talked about, but we did work with DHEC to secure some saliva-based testing kits that we're planning to avail to any family who chooses. And again, we want everyone to understand the risk of, or the elevated risk of engaging or requesting overnight visits. And again, we want to balance the risk with rights. And so the plan is to avail not only personal protective equipment for anybody who does choose after we educate them about the risk, but to avail PPE for those individuals who choose to have extended visits, as well as one of these tests that you can administer yourself and actually mail in. It comes in with a prepaid FedEx envelope to mail in to get the results.
We also have protocols when people come back from the doctor's office and the hospital visit.
Yeah, it's just there's more risk if you have it all.
And then ultimately, our staff lives in the community too. So,
Right.
We were trying to get families educated on using a mask, and it's hard though. It is difficult with individuals sometimes.
Yeah, but families have been phenomenal. I mean, really.
Very patient.
Yep, very patient. Even with the visits, it's hard, to maintain social distancing, and it's just been remarkable that the level of cooperation that we've had. We've had some angry, families, but that's natural. And but I do want to recognize that this has been a truly collaborative effort during the public health emergency. So I want to thank the families that are online, and legal representatives and siblings and friends of those we serve, who have been very respectful of our protocols and the guidance issued by DHEC and CMS.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Rufus.
All right, thank you.
All right, moving on to tab 13, new business. Chris, financial update.
All right, real quickly, one thing I'd like to do, in response to what Rufus just told you is kind of give you an update on our CARES Act request. We have been working tirelessly down in finance to submit a request to the state, their consultant, to get it to tie into the CARES Act funds that are managed by the state, and we are getting finally some movement there. So I think the large majority of the hazard pay and hero pay will be reimbursed to us through the CARES Act. The problem is the second phase is only going to go through November 30th, and they're going to gauge how much money they have left after phase 2 and determine if there's going to be a phase 3 or not. So preliminary indications are that we should get those funds restored. As well as some of our other things we've had to pay for that were unbudgeted. As far as our financial update, we have loaded now our earmarked authorization exceeding our spending plan. If you look in the first column under continuing resolution, the last line row before the bolded total there, that's the amount of spending we could approve in our spending plan. We don't have the ability to draw that down efficiently and leverage Medicaid fully to use our full authorization. So our spending plan was $749 million. You'll see there in comparing our year-to-date expenses after a quarter or through 4 months. We are at 32.38% of our spending plan, which is about 1% below budget. Again, as I've stated for months, probably tired of hearing it, is that we have some weird stuff that we have to deal with at the state that we really can't control. Keep in mind that we've already paid out boards an extra payment at this point. We pay them prospectively half a month in advance. That's $16.5 million that is in our expenses that aren't really attributable to the first 4 months. And we also had an extra payroll.
Is that because the code says you have to pay them in advance?
Now, that's how the capitated funding system was set up. They actually used to get paid a quarter in advance when this first started. And for cash flow, DDSN was like, okay, we'll start paying a month in advance, and then they dropped back to 2 weeks, basically, or half a month in advance. So, come June, they only get 1 payment instead of 2. In July, they get 3. So in July, they get paid for July plus half of August. Next month, rest of August, half of September, all the way through the end of the year until when they get to June, they get their final payment. So that's why it distorts our numbers. And of course, we're on state payroll, so we don't really have a lot of control over when they process and post payroll. We had a $3.3 million payroll hit October 30th, which was actually November 1st. So that's $19.8 million in our expenses that really aren't related to, that are timing issues, if you will. So we're actually about 2.6% below our budget, or $7 million. So we're doing well. We are working on our cash projection. We ended up last year at plus 12 million approximately, and we're still trying to work out some kinks. There's a lot of nuance to our cash projection, but we anticipate it going up, significantly again this year. Basically due to all the changes we've done from state funded, getting people Medicaid eligible, to really getting a lot more discipline in how we do things, and the FMAP enhanced funds. So we will give you an updated cash position when I'm actually comfortable with it, which I'm not yet. So it's a work in progress. That's my financial update.
Any questions regarding the financial update? Would entertain a motion to approve the financial update that is in.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Update is, back to you, Rufus. The hiring and retention bonus for LPNs and nurses at the regional centers.
Lunch here.
You guys want to eat? Do you want to hand those out now? What do you guys want?
Are we doing the list? I thought we were going to do that when we were in executive session.
That was my question. I didn't know. hand it out.
We get to executive session.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. If you'll turn to tab 14, you'll have a description of a request to the commission to enact a recruitment and retention bonus program for nursing personnel. If you think it was hard to recruit and retain nurses pre-COVID, it's doubly difficult during COVID. And so we're at a point that we're at a critical point where we desperately need to fill some workforce voids and consider these individuals or this position an essential healthcare position. It's tied to supporting the regional center and regional center operations, where you must have a licensed personnel to not only administer medications, but to perform mandated functions. And so the recruitment and retention bonus program is, pretty detailed. We're asking that we offer or have the flexibility to offer sign-on bonuses to attract nursing applicants and secure, offers of employment. We would issue a $1,000 sign-on bonus after a month of successful continuous employment. After 6 months of successful continuous employment, we would issue another $1,000. And at a 12-month mark with successful continuous employment, we would offer another $1,000 for a total of $3,000 bonus, recruitment and retention bonus, specific to recruiting and retaining licensed practical nurses and registered nurses. Once we reach $100,000 in expenditures, we will come back to the commission, if you all approve this plan, to give you an update on the efficacy of this initiative. And then again, we plan to, or we have capped it or request to cap it at 200,000. So that, again, that we know what the financial liability is with certainty. So I'll open up the questions, but ask for your support in the form of a vote, preferably a yes vote, so that we can enact this immediately.
Any questions regarding this proposed policy?
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Under the South Carolina Department of Administration, which is like 3 pages from the end.
Yes, sir.
I notice our agency is required to have a policy or plan for bonuses, and then their updated administration, the South Carolina Department of Administration on June 27th, 19, says written criteria approved by the agency's governing board or commission. So that would fulfill that requirement.
Yes, sir.
That's good. Thank you.
And what Commissioner Thomas was referring to in tab 14, summary of legislation tied to bonus pay. And actually, if you go down to the most recent proviso that allows bonus pay, it really speaks to the necessity to have a program like this to recruit and retain essential healthcare workers.
Any additional questions?
Chairman, I move that we approve this request.
Thank you, Commissioner Rollinson. Do we have a second? Second, Commissioner Miller. Any further discussion?
I would just ask that next time we do something similar to this, that it would come through the policy committee, so we could talk about it some more. Because we don't know where this is gonna end, from nurses to what, so I'm just.
Well, this is not typical. I'll just say in response to that, that's not been a policy. It's not an ongoing policy situation. So I mean, that's why traditionally it's always come to the commission as a whole.
Correct.
Anytime we've tried to put any sort of.
So this is not gonna be it's not gonna be a continuous policy then?
Well, not to the extent of the other policies like we approved that talk about the ongoing function of this agency. This is to meet a specific need that we've got right now.
Correct. And we capped it at 100,000 with, again, coming to the commission once expenditures reach 100,000. That's
How long do you think it would take to reach 100,000 approximately?
I couldn't tell you. Hopefully we got to get applicants. Right now we're having a hard time even getting nursing personnel.
33 hires.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, 33 hires gets us to $99,000 actually.
Okay, all right.
Larry, or finance committee, if you wanted to extend the argument, would be, why wouldn't it come to finance?
I could do.
I don't know, but it was just a couple things about it, but go ahead.
All right, okay. I mean, the key to me was that it's in writing, and that's the requirement of the agency.
That's right.
That has that kind of oversight of us, and so you did exactly right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. as commissioner, that's not something that I would assign out probably to a committee to resolve. That's always been something we've dealt with that as a commission. I think precisely because of what David's saying, that it requires the commission to consider. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate. Did we lose?
I guess it's resetting or something.
I think, I noticed that
Stephanie, are you still there?
Yes,
Okay.
We
We lost the feed. All right. Somebody want to alert Mark that we lost the.
didn't lose the.
Can you
we
see
have
us?
her.
Can you see us, Stephanie?
I can't see you anymore.
We can't see, but we can hear.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's just the camera.
The camera went on pause, Mark. Maybe it's coming back. Okay. All right. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Let the record reflect that passed unanimously.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next would be a Husky and waiver waiting list update from Melissa. How are you this afternoon?
Well, good afternoon. I'm going to be presenting to you from the information located in tab 15 of your packet. Get there. As noted in the briefing that was provided, there's been no Husky waiver waiting list for the past 6 years, but we are at the point in which a list must be considered. So as a recap of the information you received, there are a total of 1,055 funded Husky waiver slots. There are 1,037 individuals who are currently enrolled in the Husky waiver. I'm going to take this down so I can
Go ahead,
breathe a little. In addition to that, there are 58 individuals who have requested and been allocated a waiver slot. So those individuals are pending Husky waiver enrollment. And I'm sorry, when I say Husky, I'm referring to the head and spinal cord injury waiver. So between those enrolled and pending, the slots were allocated beyond capacity, as you can see. This was a calculated decision. It was needed as a result of, one, the need to transition individuals out of the rehabilitation support service. That was a state plan funded service. DDSN previously provided that provision of that service ended March the 1st. If you recall, we terminated provision of that service as a result of some of the changes to the requirements for the service, which made the individuals who were receiving it ineligible to receive it any longer. So for those folks, we allocated waiver slots to those who weren't enrolled the waiver, so that we could allow them to transition into other services. And then the other reason is that there was a stagnation in the enrollment process. So individuals had been in pending status for an elongated period of time while others needed access to services. We have some process improvements in place to address that. Based on Husky waiver enrollment patterns over the past year, about 61% of individuals who are allocated a Husky waiver slot will actually result in enrollment. So given those enrollment patterns, we have the potential to be over-allocated by 17 more than the stated 1,055 total funded slots. So because of this, consideration must be given to a Husky waiver waiting list. Just want to make it clear that we're not proposing to take slots from people who've already been allocated slots. The process for implementation of a Husky waiver waiting list would include that we would immediately stop allocating Husky waiver slots and we would begin a waiting list. If we at any point reach the point of over-enrollment, we would account for that through natural attrition over a period of time. As individuals leave the waiver, those vacated slots won't be filled until we reach the funded level of 1,055. And then after reaching that level of 1,055, we would allocate one new waiver slot to a person on the waiting list for every person terminated from the waiver. Implementation of a waiting list for services where one does not currently exist is obviously not ideal. So because of the General Assembly's guidance for agencies to use current funding flexibly as a result of COVID-19, consideration was given to converting a number of community support CS waiver slots into Husky waiver slots in order to avoid implementation of a Husky waiver waiting list. Given the average annual cost of Husky and CS waiver services, it's estimated that 108 CS waiver slots would be required to fund Husky waiver needs through the end of fiscal year 21. Now, when giving consideration to the options for implementing a waiting list or converting CS waiver slots to Husky waiver slots, we considered One, that there's been no Husky waiver waiting list for 6 years, while there's been a continual waiting list for the CS waiver. The current wait time is about 3.2 years for the CS waiver. While people with brain and spinal cord injury often require more immediate services related to their need for assistance with activities of daily living, like dressing, bathing, etc., those with intellectual disabilities and related disabilities and their families also require services. We also wanted to consider the possibility of appearing to prioritize the head and spinal cord injury waiver participants over CS waiver participants. And finally, while the General Assembly staff have been supportive of using CS funding, formal approval would be required. So taking all of those factors into consideration, the staff recommendation was to start a Husky waiver waiting list. Do you have any questions for me?
Based on sort of normal attrition and things like that, any predictions of how long it'll take that list is to somebody's number 17 on that list to get up to actually have a slot? Yeah.
So in this, I can just give, in fiscal year 20, we had about 88 terminations from the head and spinal cord injury waiver. We have fewer this year because of the CARES Act, so we've held terminating people from the waiver unless they were terminated for a specific reason like death or moved out of state or into an institution. So we only have about 15 thus far this fiscal year, so it's going to look a little bit different than it would have normally.
And that's, I assume, part of the reason why we're running out of slots is because we're keeping people.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes. Yes.
Any additional questions? And are we looking for a motion on this to approve the creation of that list? Okay. Anybody have any questions regarding?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
because my daughter is on a Husky waiver, do I have to, remove myself for conflict of interest on this issue or not?
You know, I don't think you have to because you're already receiving services, but if it would make you more comfortable, there's no reason why you can't abstain from participating. If that makes you more comfortable, that's certainly acceptable. Thank you. All right. Any additional questions with regard to this? Perfect time. Would entertain a motion then to approve the creation of a Husky waiver waiting list.
So moved.
Commissioner Miller, do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Blackman, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the record will reflect that Commissioner Rawlinson abstained participation in this particular issue. That is approved.
Thank you.
All right. State Director's report.
We do have a State Fiscal Accountability Authority, SFAA meeting on December 17th. We have the Center property conveyance to the city of Clinton on the agenda. The Whitten project has been there since at least 2016 and it needs to get completed. That's one of those infrastructure issues that we need to get on top of. Once this is done, then we'll place the transfer of the 60 properties on there so we can have I just don't want to have the issues kind of linked or compete with one another. Let's just get one through and then we'll work on the next one. But our staff and I have already met with Ekstrom, and we were able to clear a couple of misconceptions, especially with who commissioned the study on the infrastructure issue. We did. We'll reach out again to discuss the 60 properties in depth because he had some other questions, and we want to make sure that that they were answered in the meeting. But I want to get this Whitten Center thing through, and then we'll worry about the others and give them a good grounding in the history of, so much just goes back to the history of DDSN. Right now, we were unable to get a meeting with one of the board members and or his staff. So we're keep reaching out, keep trying to do that. We have a Legislative Oversight Committee update from the previous, from 2018, when we were under the House and the Senate Oversight Committees. It's due on December 13th because there was one partially done at the time of our last update item, and that was increasing the number of DSPs. And of course, you know, all the usual suspects are in there, ramping up recruiting efforts, not vamping up, ramping up recruiting efforts. That didn't sound right. But we're in the mass too long. Use of online recruiters. Well, maybe that might work. We might want to try that. Use of the online recruiters such as Indeed, increasing our orientations to 2 times a month, and increasing the number of job hiring events we hold. We've also taken on the issue, and this was the bigger issue, and this is the bigger task that the reason why this remained partially completed was the issue of a more long-term approach as far as DSPs go. We've taken the task on as an educational issue and developed a DSP credentialing curriculum for seniors in high school. We did have 26 participants at our 2 pilot schools. Of course, COVID kind of threw a wrench into our on-site internship. We couldn't do those at that point. So they didn't materialize. It should be known that the program has been well received by students, school districts, and DDSN providers. DDSN has worked with the Department of Education, Office of Career and Technical Education, to have the direct support professional recognized as an industry credential. And it's been approved by the SC Education Oversight Committee. This will allow schools and students to receive recognition for their efforts, and it would also give them something to go into the hiring process with a provider halfway through orientation, well, 3/4 of the way through orientation, and all they would need left is that agency-specific training. So, I mean, they're even doing background checks and things like that, so all that stuff is done. We need school to be operating in a manner which would let these students have those on-site internships that would add that extra, it would be component that is required because we want students to understand what they're getting into. And that internship helps us get there. So it would help with retention too on the other side. We've implemented increased information security reforms at central office and the regional centers, basically on the TheraP. Right, Pat, Chris, it's the TheraP system that we have two-factor authentications. I can't do this at the end of the meeting. This is like receiving a kind of a code from your bank when you get those little extra PIN codes from your bank to verify that's actually your computer. So we're doing that to increase the amount of security we have. We will be rolling out this two-factor verifications to provider networks within the next couple of months. I do want to say thank you because we have seen an increase in COVID cases throughout the state. To Midland Center and Coastal Center, who have both experienced an increase in those COVID-19 cases. We currently have 3 residents statewide in the 14-day window, and 11 days ago we had 26 in that window. So they're seeing that curve go back down. Just want to say thank you to them. I think every so often we need to make sure they understand that we understand that they are dealing with this on the front line. As a result of the inspections, citations, and the IJ, the immediate jeopardy at Witten Center in July, DHEC has proposed issuing a fine. We are currently appealing that decision. And I have some reasons for that appeal, but you know, we're putting those appeal in writing, and we are appealing their decision to fine us since it's kind of an unprecedented time, and they came in the middle of the height of our call-outs. And even fining is unprecedented. So we want to make sure that they're treating Witten Center fairly and like they would any other ICF in the state. Update on waiver enrollment.
How much was the fine?
Oh, I think it's 10,000 something.
It's 11,000.
Oh, 11,000.
With 6,000 and some change in abeyance, so the actual monetary penalty will be around 5,000.
5,000.
Was it because, I mean, I kind of was up on that, you know, we were talking during all this. And I mean, I got the feeling we were doing everything we could do. We didn't have staff. It was just a really rough situation to go through.
Well, and that's another reason we're appealing it. I think if I was in the wrong, I'm the kind of person that I'm not going to fight.
It's the idea of it. I mean, I don't know what hindsight's always 20/20. Now, if we were violating things that they had told us that we had to do, and they give you a warning, said, look, we told you, you needed to do this. Now, if it was something like that, then I think the commission, you need to tell us a little bit about this later on, not now, but maybe at some other time, but.
No, it was exactly what we told you. They were investigating complaints, many of them quite old. In other words, they came in July, but the complaints were back in April. So if a complaint is that serious, why aren't you coming then? Or at least asking for information. They also came and found one signature missing from a housekeeper's checklist out of thousands of checklists. And it was, as far as our PPE and our infection control, no citations on that. So this goes back.
The things that mattered.
To me, yes. And then also the day that the IJ, we report those things. When someone has an elopement, we report that. And if it was an immediate jeopardy, why wasn't it investigated at the time the report was made? And why was it made after somebody complained?
So the fine was not given, or the reprimand, or whatever you want to term it, was not given in violation of one of their COVID rules for the agencies.
Rufus can speak to this.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I've never had a fine before. This is
Yeah, the reported visits, there were multiple reports of visits, but I think to echo Mary's point or reinforce it, we gotta look at materiality. And so when you're looking at things and asking staff who have been working tremendous amounts of hours, and at the time, a couple of the visits where we had the major citations, more than 100 staff, were COVID positive. And so I expect to maintain optimal operations under those circumstances is unrealistic. And so, again, we're questioning materiality. And then I think it's also important to note that all of the regional centers had reviews by DHEC, some tied to complaints, and with the exception of Witten Center, all of our state operated facilities were deficiency free. And we hadn't explored that point a lot because, like Mary said, we take care of people and we just don't have time to grandstand, but Witten Center was an anomaly because it truly was an anomaly.
Yeah.
100 people positive staff, that's significant.
So you have an unprecedented pandemic. No one's ever lived through this before. We had unprecedented call outs. We've never had 90 to 100 people call out. And then that's when they decide to come in and look at complaints. So to me, it's almost like piling on. And then you add an unprecedented fine that they've never done before.
When we were talking, we were even worried that we might not have staff to do janitorial work.
Yes.
Remember that? I mean, to clean the bathroom.
Because we were talking about us going in and doing that.
Yeah.
And I think that.
I volunteered. If you need somebody, I don't like.
My thing is we also had a lot of media attention.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure that does not have anything to do with this. But to me, it's like, it's an unprecedented time. Why would you pick now to put a fine in place when you have never done that before? That is it's just, there's something just wrong about that. I know it's not a whole lot of money, but that's not the point. The principle.
Well, I think it's because, and I'm certainly not, every time I had inquired, or every time Gary, you and I were sort of, we were discussing whether or not we needed to have emergency commission meetings and all this stuff, and I was convinced y'all were on top of it. There's always a question about, well, is it sufficient or whatever, but it's, what a bizarre situation we're in. I'm just, okay.
Yeah, it was,
Okay.
Yeah, we were both on the ground there. So we're watching everything day to day. And, but anyway, this is a request. The risk management group, our quality management, risk management / quality management has done a lot of pre-work to get us to a point where decisions are now needed to be made. And before we can go any further, because, we're going to have to do a lot of work if we go down this road, or if we go down this road, we want to make sure we have the direction from the commission at this point. But we had to do some pre-work so you can see what we're asking for. So if you remember, I was saying we need to have a work group. So I would ask the commission to set a work group up in January. So
how many hours would you expect?
I'm going to say at a minimum of 3. If David's allowed to attend 5. Barry's allowed to attend, forget about it.
Yeah, another 30 minutes.
So no, we do, but we do. I mean, this is a big discussion. We can't do it in this forum. It needs to be in that work group session, because I want you, when I first came in, this was my project, was to increase quality in programs. And I think that we've got a proposal, we've got some choices as to what we do. We're on a time frame because we've got a lot of contracts that are coming up. So this is very important to make some decisions at this point.
Do we want to have that in close proximity to the next? Are you going to be asking for any motions in the next commission meeting? In other words,
I would ask if we did it the night before the meeting, like.
Well, that was sort of going to be my question. Does it make sense to do it?
Yeah, well, kind of not too late, Barry, because a lot of us are here at, 7 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, we'd have to do it really the afternoon before.
Yes.
I mean, this is a work schedule kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at the calendar right, we'd be on the 21st for the January meeting. That's the third Thursday.
Yeah.
And so we'd be talking about the afternoon of the 20th.
And we can do this virtually too for some folks if they want. I don't have a problem, but it'll be a public meeting.
Let's everybody check their calendar for the 20th. And let me know something over the next couple of days. And January the 20th.
Yeah, because you told me I couldn't do it before Christmas, so
Yeah,
we already got that on there. We're there.
I'm good.
Okay. And we'll set it up from there, and Mary, follow up with me personally.
So it'll be January 20th.
Yeah, January 20th would be the tentative date, unless that's a problem for
That's
you.
actually good.
This is gonna be serious stuff. It's not gonna be
This is not fluff.
stuff where it's so fluffy.
This is a
you like
paradigm
to
shift.
imagine it or something.
This is an absolute paradigm shift on quality.
Okay.
Yep, it's very, very important. I don't do a lot of fluff on this job.
Put on that going like 2 to 5.
Well, and I don't mean to criticize, but when you're told things in one of these kinds of meetings, that you already know about how boards operate, and it seems, look, I know you have to tell me this, but we've already been here for hours, and I don't want my time put upon like nobody does. Nobody wants their time put upon. So just make sure it's half hour, please.
You can blame most of that on the commissioner, on the chair's,
Whatever.
the chair's lack of control.
Whatever. Make it so that it's half hour.
We're good. We'll plan on the 20th, 2 to 5.
Sandwiches are waiting.
Yep, we're good. Mary, we're gonna let Mary get through it.
Okay,
Let
and the
Mary get
last
through
thing I
everything.
need to
That's why
talk
I
about is the, I'm sorry, but, this
No,
is
Mary,
my
Mary,
only chance to
no,
talk.
Mary,
EVV,
You're good.
the electronic visit verification. This is a mandate set forth in the Cures Act, not the CARES Act, but the Cures Act, as a means to cut down on fraud and waste in at-home healthcare programs. The deadline to be compliant with this law is January 1st, 2021. Since we're not the Medicaid agency, we really not had the opportunity to choose the system or build the system. HHS has chosen a system called CareCall, which is tied to their Phoenix system of case management. Right now, we're having a little bit of an issue because some of our at-home services are not going through Phoenix. And so they're going through a different portal. So I want you to know that we know that they were looking for a new system. I think they did it back in September of 2019, but they've had issues with procurement and MMO, and so it's taken them 12 months to work through that. So to be compliant by January 1st, 2021, they're going to be using Phoenix system, so we're probably going to have some sort of workaround to make sure our folks get in there and are compliant. Although CMS is starting not to take such a hard line on the date because probably because of COVID. There's a lot of states that are not going to be compliant with this by this date. So we'll keep an ear to the ground on that, but there is a fine for non-compliance. It is 0.5%, right? 0.5% of your FMAP.
For the affected service.
Right, but for the affected services. So we would have to look specifically at the services that are affected by this. But at the beginning, CMS was just saying, we're going to take 0.5 of your FMAP altogether, but they've changed that to the affected services. So they're getting very granular to make sure that it's only the services that are providing that in-home support. We also had an issue about respite not being included in this because it really isn't personal care. But when CMS said personal care, they meant any service that involves an element of personal care. So respite, you do involve an element of personal care in there. So anyway, I know that Director Baker is in constant contact with CMS and he has been letting me know, and our team will be meeting with them to discuss options of maybe putting things through their app so it gets into their call care system. We're going to be working on that right now. Okay? I am going to, I try to cut everything down just to make sure I got the important stuff in and, okay, I'm good.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions for the executive director regarding her report? Okay, the next item on the agenda is an executive session. Would entertain a motion to move into executive session to discuss an employment matter regarding the executive director. We have Commissioner Blackwood, Commissioner Malpris is the second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We will move into executive session after a brief break.
Someone call me.
Was that?
I'll give you a call.
Okay, someone.
We rose from executive session, that no decisions were made, no votes were taken, no motions were made, rather, no motions were made, no decisions were rendered, no votes were taken. All right.
Now, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Now that we've arisen.
Yes.
That then terminates at this point in time?
Yes.
Something else on the agenda?
Correct.
So is it in order then to adjourn?
Yes.
Make a motion. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Blackwood. You have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Malpris. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the new folks,